What's up, Reefer Revolutionaries? It's 420 in California, And this is the Reefer Revolution Cannabis Helps Dementia crossover show. No. What's up, Reefer Revolutionaries? It's 420 in California, and this is the Reefer Revolution Cannabis Helps Dementia crossover show.
Get up and get out. Get rid of that frown that's been dragging you down and get up in the air. Just pretend that you can fly. You'll never know if you can till you try. So get out and you're right. Be able and strong. Give vent to that intent you've had pent up for so long. Come on up and see what it's like being out where you're free. Just do
That's right, Reefer Revolutionaries. Do something that... Oh, that's... Where is it? Wait. Oh, there it is. What's up, Reefer Revolutionaries? That's right. Do something that's new. And that is the new theme song of our new podcast, Cannabis Helps Dementia. And we are here to celebrate the release of the new podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and all kinds of things through Anchor FM. And I say we, I of course mean everybody jumping in the chat and Coach Chela.
Hi guys, hi everybody.
Hopefully everybody can hear Coach Chela. Make sure you let me know. OBS keeps updating their thing, and we haven't been here in like weeks.
Yeah,
Where have
it's
we
been a
been?
minute. It's been a minute.
It has been a minute, but I've got
been some stuff going on.
A little couple of things going on, and not the least of which is the global pandemic. So we are vaporizing today on the show, and a lot more lately, because of the thing. So I've got my bag of lovely... What are we smoking? What are we vaping today? Do we know? Special.
Something wonderful.
Something wonderful. Mm-hmm. Something wonderful green. I'll pull out a bud later and show it to you.
It's something wonderful. I think it's a new strain from a friend who grows for personal cultivation. And I don't know the name of it. I only have the fruits of the labor.
The fruits of the labor.
So, yeah. So, hi, everybody. Nice to see you. So glad to be back.
I see Mad Goat
CJ,
is here.
Poe and
Mad Goat
and Jilly Love.
Jilly Love.
And Cannabis Sativa just jumped in. Hi, guys.
Hey, Jilly Love. Thanks for joining us on or in the chat with Ron Placone. That was really cool of Ron.
Yeah, that was awesome.
To share, have us on his show. He had no idea we had a new podcast going. So that was very fortuitous.
Just fortuitous. Yeah, it was good.
And but he was definitely reaching out in this. We are friends here in the greater LA area, him in Pasadena, and Cannabis Sativa. Mr. Sativa, welcome, welcome. And CJ, haven't seen you for a while. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for jumping into the show. Hope everyone is healthy and safe and nurturing your endocannabinoid system.
Yes.
So important. In this time of global pandemic. And,
we're not doctors.
We're not doctors.
To be clear,
but listen,
as you all know, everybody in this room, knows we're not doctors.
But we heard a lot of doctors with a lot of our viewers the other day. Dr. Barry, Dr. Mike, they were all in that webinar that Healer did with Dr. Russo and, of course, Dr. Sulak. Was the host, of course, and had much information. But of course, Ethan Russo, who is in our first episode of Cannabis Helps Dementia, episode 1, telling our story and getting a little tidbit on how cannabis helps dementia from the master researcher himself, Dr. Ethan Russo.
Yeah.
My bag is still filling. That's the noise in the background.
Filling the bag.
Apropos. But guys, so that's what we've been doing. We've been getting our Cannabis Helps Dementia podcast launched. It is official. We are up on the iTunes. Oh wait, I'm going to bring it up here. We are up on the iTunes. We are using, of course, like you know. But if you've heard our little trailer, you know that we are using Anchor FM, which just sort of great service that appeared just when we needed it. Don't you think that's the way things are? So Anchor FM, that it just showed up perfectly when we needed it, and we made it over there on Anchor FM. So I'm trying to. Oh, there it is. There's the websites. I had to reboot my thing. But we ended up using Anchor FM. And boy, did they make it easy to make a podcast.
This is not the commercial.
This is not the commercial.
You'll hear that next.
We could play the commercial because we did do a commercial for Anchor FM for our podcast.
You may hear it.
They were our first sponsor. Yeah, if you're listening, when you go and listen to the podcast on iTunes, which is what we're asking for you guys to do today, guys. That's what the big push of the show today is, to get all of our viewers, everybody that's in the chat and everybody that joins us and watches us later, is follow the link at some point. You can even do it sort of now while you're listening to us, because we're going to play the podcasts. Awesome. We're going to play all the podcasts for you today, but you can go over there and just kind of turn the volume down over there. But if you can go get over onto iTunes, and you can do it from the Anchor FM site. You can go to Anchor FM or anchor.fm/Cannabis Helps Dementia, and all of the podcast choices where it distributes. And that's one of the great things about this, is it distributes it automatically to 9 different podcast services at the moment, Spotify being the most recently added. So we are up on Spotify. If you enjoy listening there, if you've got a playlist of podcasts, throw us in that over there. But we are making a push to get over to Anchor and get to the Apple podcasts for our show. Oh, look, there's our reviews I conveniently put up there. And that's what we'd like you to do. We'd like you to rate and review for us over on iTunes.
That'd be awesome.
And we've got 3 episodes up, and our goal is to try to get up on the new and noteworthy section of iTunes. Now, I think this is a pretty bold goal for this humble platform, humble show.
Humble little show.
Hello, Stony Baker, MD. Welcome to the show. Thanks for joining in. We are talking about the push today to go over to iTunes and put in Cannabis Helps Dementia, or just follow the links from Anchor FM, Cannabis Helps Dementia, to the iTunes. Open up on the iTunes. Sorry, I'm overmodulating there. Open up on the iTunes and then rate and review for us. And that will get a buzz going. We want to spark a buzz about cannabis, how cannabis helps dementia over on iTunes. And what's kind of cool is we have 11 ratings already, all 5 stars. And some reviews. We could take a look at some of these reviews already. We've got Stu in Dallas, 429. Fantastic information. So looking forward to learning more about what Chela and Dave have to share with us about the numerous ways that cannabis helps dementia. They've accumulated a wealth of knowledge with firsthand experience in navigating the tough road ahead with a loved one's brain change journey. A podcast not to be missed. Thank you, Stu in Dallas.
Nice. Dallas.
Stu from Dallas. CA Amplifier. Well done. Thank you for putting this together. Dan, the Maui man. A must podcast for those who are facing the debilitating experience of facing and dealing with an elder family member or friend who has dementia. And Maui Dan goes on. We've got Grasp Health. Grasp Health dropped a note in there. They're a cannabis company.
Yes, a cannabis
education company,
specifically for people living in nursing homes and palliative care and hospice in Arizona right now. They used to also be in California, but California is so muddled and screwed up with our laws that they have focused on Arizona for the moment.
I see. My bag is full enough. I'm going to turn it off.
Full bag.
Colorado says, thanks. Thanks for this enlightening series. I'm inspired to know more. Thanks for all you're doing in a much needed area.
Am I supposed to hear you in my ear now?
No.
Okay, cool. Just making sure.
No. We are going out. I think we're going out.
It's been a minute.
Stony Bateman says his dad had it, and it was awful.
It is. It's the worst.
Many folks will, if they have not been affected, they have not been touched or in relationship with dementia right now, they probably will be. 1 in 3 seniors will die with dementia. And this is why we decided to make the podcast. We had a 10-year journey, which you will hear about in episode 1. And we have started making a documentary, but you know how long documentaries take to make? And not a lot of shooting going on right now and interviews going on right now out in the world. So we have some information we want to share. It hasn't been out yet.
Indeed.
So we wanted to get it into our podcast. We've been talking about this podcast for a while. So we thought we would use our quarantine and our stay at home, safer at home time productively and get it going. So it is official. We are up on all the platforms. iTunes has given us the thumbs up. The first 3 episodes are up. And Stony Bakeman, I need some Tangy sativa in my life. That sounds good too. I've got a full bag of whatever this lovely
unnamed, yet to be named cultivar. Lovingly grown.
And shared.
Yes.
And so we are vaping. And Chela, you have your packs, do you not?
I do have my packs.
Chela has her packs. So while you're getting to the iTunes to do all that rating and reviewing for us, to kind of give us a bump and over this weekend, we appreciate it so much.
And share.
Share.
Because,
review.
they don't let you promote any social media posts if it says cannabis in it.
Exactly.
They're kind of draconian like that. So if you could please, share. Amongst your folk, that'd be awesome.
It's the chronic, not the corona.
Not the corona, yeah.
Good news on that front, actually, though, Chela, as we learned right as this pandemic started and everybody shut down and we shut down the show. We were on break and we just kept taking a break. And they gave us our monetization back, or they remonetized our channel. So,
which is weird.
There are super chats now.
Which is weird.
There are super chats. People can do memberships, I think.
I don't even know what any of that means because we haven't had it.
Well, many people who watch all the YouTube shows, because we never had it, right? We've never been able to monetize our show. Couple of issues. We do a news show, so there's fair use issues because we play news stuff. Okay, so we clear all that off. The other thing is the cannabis stuff. YouTube is notorious for shutting down cannabis, demonetizing cannabis. And so we just had trouble getting our monetization back over the years doing the show. Finally scrubbed it down to a point where they were happy enough that we were making enough original content and weren't showing so much news that they would give it back. So I was like, hooray. And then every video got demonetized because of its content, because it wasn't friendly for advertisers because of the cannabis content. So double-edged sword. There are some advertisings running on some of the videos on our channel, and it looks like we can do super chats when we're live. So as Ron Placone said, you guys should go live because why not? People, we're a live show, and if you can do that. So if you want to do a super chat, you can. You can also, the cool thing about Anchor FM. Now I know we do Patreon, and we have, for those of you who are our patrons of the channel, we appreciate it. We have put that on hold for the pandemic. But you can support over on Anchor FM. There's a support button. You just click on that support button and you can do 99 cents a month. You can do $4.99. You can do $9.99, and you can do it with Google Pay, credit card, and you can support the podcast that way. And something else is kind of cool you can do, Chela. You can leave a message.
That's so cool.
You can leave an audio message that we can include in the podcast. If it's, so if you've got a story about how cannabis helps dementia in your family, we want to know about it.
Yes. We want to know about it.
Leave us a message over on Anchor FM at the message button. It won't let me do it because, nice try. You can't leave yourself a message. But you could leave a message. And if we like it, if it's cool, we can put it, we'll put it in the podcast. Just tell us if you like it. That'd be cool too. And if you do have a bigger story, if you have a deeper story you want to tell about the subject, we would love to have you on the show. If you are a caregiver, because the focus of the podcast is we're not doctors or medical professionals of any kind, but we talk to doctors, researchers, nurses, administrators, other caregivers, and people actually living with dementia about how cannabis helps them and helps the people that they care for, and in relationship, people in relationship with dementia. So that's pretty cool that you can do that support over on Anchor. So we're pretty excited that everything is happening, and we're asking you guys today. We're going to go ahead and play the first episode. Oh, good. We're going to take a little break. Did you die?
I accidentally
unplugged.
Try installing in an hour instead of tonight.
Oh, shoot.
So now I have software updates installing.
Good time. It's a good time to go.
I'm going to get on the phone.
Yes.
See if I can chat with
you. Can get in the chat on the YouTube there. Okay,
I've
perfect.
hit all kinds of buttons.
Perfect timing.
Big wide eyes.
No problem.
Okay.
No problem. Everybody hears you. We hear you.
Back into it.
We will. We're going to get back into it. It's been a while since we've been back. We did a little check-in on the road, but thank you guys for joining in. Appreciate you coming on back. Stony Bakerman. Stony Baker MD. I think that is. Jilly Love 101 is there. Dabba Cannabis over on D-Live, guys. We are multi-streaming. We're actually going out on all of our Facebook pages. So if you're on any of our Facebook page, drop a note in there. I'll see if I can see you. But we do have a new Facebook page. You can follow the new show, the new podcast over on Twitter is at Cannabis Helps on Twitter. It's very crazy how we had to do this because not everything was available. So on Twitter... Oh, that works. Sounds good. So on Twitter, we're at Cannabis Helps. On Instagram, we got the full Monty over there. We're at Cannabis Helps Dementia on Instagram. And on Facebook, who won't let you use cannabis in the word of your username, we are CHD Podcast. So if you search Cannabis Helps Dementia on any of those platforms, you'll find the pages. But specifically, that's where you are. The Twitter at Cannabis Helps, Instagram at Cannabis Helps Dementia, and Facebook where we're streaming right now live. Well, we should be anyway. Hope we are. Let's see. Yep, there we are. Yep, we are live. We're live over there. So, and we're also streaming over on Hemp Saves the World over on Facebook, and your Facebook page and my Facebook page.
I guess.
Not that anybody's watching on them, but we are. We're trying to get the message out, guys. We are trying to get the message out about how cannabis helps dementia. And we are going to bring you the first episode right here, right now. And while it's playing here on YouTube, feel free to let it play. I forgot about our theme song. I got to talk about our theme song. But go over to iTunes, put in Cannabis Helps Dementia, find the show, subscribe, and rate it. Awesome. Thank you, Jilly Love. Whoop, whoop. We're trying to get up on the new and noteworthy on iTunes. This is like I Googled what's the best way to get a podcast out, and this is the first thing that came up. So that's the marketing tip I took. It's the way I roll, baby. Very Esther Hicksy. Very vortexy. See what the Google says. So I do want to, however, one of the things that's in the podcast, the music for the first 3 episodes was some very nice music that we found on that was copyright free to use. And I don't have his name in front of me, but we'll have it when we come back. Dan something. Dan Leibowitz. Thank you very much. Lovely little tune. While we were... wishful thinking. Very good. Thanks, Chela. We have a very talented songwriter in the family. And so we put him to task and, but there's a lot going on, in the world. And, we were just going through his library. And we found a song in his huge library of songs that is just perfect for our show. The theme, the melody, everything just kind of is perfect. And the fact that he wrote it is amazing. So his name is Doug Goodwin. And if you guys are fans of the Bernie channel that I was on, Bernie 2016 TV, I put his song Americans to some Bernie video during that push in 2016. But he's a very talented songwriter, wrote a lot of music for Hanna-Barbera in the 70s, Pink Panther show on TV, a lot of great stuff. And he wrote this great song that's called Try Something That's New. And that is very apropos to what we're trying to get across to the medical profession and people that have nothing. There is nothing approved, any medicine for the symptoms of dementia. And we think that we have something that might help or know of something. Now, we don't personally. We know of something, as many people do, as you will see on the podcast.
Pull out my book. It's behind you.
It's behind me.
I forgot. I should have done that.
That's okay. We'll have it when we come back.
Okay, yeah, totally.
So we're going to play the song, Find Something That's New, written and sung by Doug Goodwin. And we'll go right into episode 1 of Cannabis Helps Dementia, featuring our story and Dr. Ethan Russo. Please enjoy. Oi, we have our
All you have to
monetization
do
on our,
to
on our
lose weight.
channel's back. That's awesome. I wouldn't skip the ad, but we're
We're with you guys.
we're busy.
Got our friends in the living room.
I'll see you in a minute. Well, 20 minutes.
Why don't you get wise? Get up and get out. Get rid of that frown that's been dragging you down and get up in the air. Just pretend that you can fly. You'll never know if you can till you try. So get out and you're right. Be able and strong. Give vent to that intent you've had pent up for so long. Come on up and see what it's like being out where you're free. Just do something that's real unique. Do something that's new.
Hi, and welcome to Cannabis Helps Dementia. I'm Chela.
I'm Dave, and right up front, we'd like to say we're not doctors or medical professionals, and nothing you hear in this podcast should be considered medical advice.
Right. So, in 2010, after my mom was diagnosed with mixed dementias, vascular and Alzheimer's disease, we dove into family caregiving and became fierce advocates for people living with dementia. We're kind of experts now.
We're not, but throughout this podcast series, you'll hear from doctors, nurses, researchers, administrators, other caregivers, and people living with dementia about how cannabis helps.
Like it did for our family.
That's right. And in this premiere episode, we have our first real expert. World-renowned authority on the medical use of cannabis, Dr. Ethan Russo, will tell us about the research on how cannabis helps dementia. But first, we'd like to share some of our story, how cannabis helped Chela's mom after she was diagnosed with the most common forms of the disease.
Yeah, we noticed she was forgetting stuff, but nothing too weird. Repeating stories.
She wasn't taking her medications properly.
Wait till you get old, she'd say.
And she hadn't been cooking much.
I've cooked for people all my life. I'm done.
She was getting lost driving.
But that wasn't so unusual. She always had a bad sense of direction.
She paid her bills multiple times in the same month and became seriously overdrawn.
All right, that's what alerted us that something was wrong.
Mom fell a few times, but she really hated going to doctors.
The last one was spectacular enough to scare her into a visit to the emergency room.
Yeah, at the hospital, the doctor said flatly, "Miss Seagram, you have dementia."
In another room, the social worker told us, "You know she can't live alone, right?"
And just like that, our whole world turned upside down.
Dementia is still a great mystery to science.
Well, they know little more today than they did over 100 years ago when Dr. Alzheimer named the most common type.
That's probably why it's the most feared diagnosis.
Dementia affects more women than men, and more people of color than whites.
Maybe that's the reason research has been historically underfunded.
There are more than 16 million unpaid family and friend caregivers for the nearly 6 million Americans currently living with dementia.
And there are an estimated 47 million people worldwide in the same boat.
The cost of dementia care in the U.S. is now around $277 billion annually, and that is expected to grow to $1 trillion by 2050.
When I'm 80, $1 trillion a year.
It's really cynical, but if for no other reason, the cost of care is going to consume our economy unless something changes.
We clearly need a new approach.
Today in the U.S., 1 in 3 seniors dies with dementia. There are over 100 types.
And in California, the most diverse and populous state, Alzheimer's is the leading cause of death among women.
Dementia has no effective treatment. We don't know the cause, and there is no end in sight.
Okay, but we digress. Back to our story.
Right. Cut to interior world-famous Formosa Cafe night. A couple of film workers sit in a red vinyl booth. They're surrounded by an audience of vintage autographed headshots.
Brando, Bogart, Marilyn, Elvis, all looking on as they toss back martinis, crying in their mac and cheese about how their fun-loving, carefree lifestyle has suddenly been destroyed.
She has f***ing Alzheimer's disease. We were clueless, self-centered, and lacked practical skills.
Though I've done props on medical shows, as you know, we're not medical professionals, so we started to get educated. I read 15 plus books on Alzheimer's and related dementias, did loads of research, went to support groups and every doctor visit with my research in hand and questions galore. We were still clueless.
We found out that even the most experienced geriatrician, neurologist, or researcher is almost as clueless about the disease as the doctor I might play on TV. They know little more than Dr. Alzheimer did in 1906. The leading Alzheimer's organizations have all but given up on a cure and are now focused on prevention and promoting brain health as the solution to this devastating disease.
Which is great for those who don't have dementia yet, but we desperately need effective treatments for people suffering today. I mean, I get it, but it's hard to avoid a disease, the cause of which we don't fully understand, and the research on prevention points to a massive overhaul of our diet and lifestyle. There's no quick fix.
Obviously, the medical community is stymied by dementia. No effective treatment in over a century, no known cause, and no cure on the horizon.
Yeah, you keep saying that. Let's get back to our story.
Right. Cut to montage. We cared for Mom at home the first 4 years. Initially, it was complete triage, constantly reacting to the major changes for all of us.
Including having to live with my narcissist mother who had been intent on breaking us up since before our first date.
Yeah, well, when we began this journey in 2010, we only knew Alzheimer's was a terrible disease that was bad news for your memory.
Look, any form of dementia is no joke for all concerned. The irony is that the only way to get through it is to laugh and find the positive aspects, after all your dreams have been crushed.
But that took us some time to figure out. Little did we know, the answer was in our stash box all along.
When my mom was diagnosed with dementia, the docs were very much against her using cannabis at all.
She can't have marijuana. It's bad for her memory.
Her neurologist held us hostage for a drug that's supposed to slow down the progression of Alzheimer's disease and said she couldn't have it if she used marijuana.
So we kept cannabis away from her for most of the first year. We didn't know the drug interactions. We didn't know anything.
At the time.
It was hard to tell the difference between side effects of the new prescription medication Mom was on and the symptoms of Alzheimer's progression.
You may have picked up, my mom had been rather demanding even before she got sick.
They prescribed a benzodiazepine for her relentless anxiety and agitation, which worked great the first day.
But she had an adverse reaction the day after when she totally freaked out and called me terrible names, accusing me of trying to kill her.
They prescribed a powerful antipsychotic for the severe aggression.
They called it dementia-related psychosis.
There's a notice on the bottle that has a black box around it that reads,
Warning, increased mortality in elderly patients with dementia-related psychosis. Elderly patients with dementia-related psychosis treated with antipsychotic drugs are at an increased risk of death. Not approved for the treatment of patients with dementia-related psychosis.
But Medicare paid for it.
She was much nicer on the antipsychotic medication for a few days, but then back to the name-calling freakouts.
They prescribed a different antipsychotic with the same warning to replace the first one. They prescribed an antidepressant.
Because she was terribly depressed that she was losing her mind, her freedom, herself.
They prescribed an anticonvulsant, a powerful seizure medication that has a similar black box warning.
To relieve Mom's restlessness and the cyclical constant questions. She never stopped asking the same questions over and over, and she developed a tremor, side effect of the anticonvulsant medication.
They prescribed another antidepressant, off-label, to help Mom's insomnia. And of course, they prescribed the common drugs that are supposed to slow down the disease process. All these medications have serious side effect warnings that include kidney and liver damage, organ failure, stroke, and sudden death.
Which wouldn't be so bad if they actually helped at all. On the prescription meds taken as prescribed and on their lowest doses, Mom fell frequently. Some of the less severe side effects of these drugs included nervousness, restlessness, and inability to sit still, which is particularly troublesome when there's also weakness, loss of balance, and dizziness.
She experienced all those side effects, and worse, the meds didn't do anything for the symptoms we were trying to treat.
Mom's falls forced me to take time off work, which is when we began to wise up.
She had refused to get out of bed for 3 weeks. Somehow, she had remembered she had fallen several times and was terrified to fall again.
Her new doctor was calling it failure to thrive.
We thought for sure this was it.
I was in her room, the TV on, researching side effects, drug-drug interactions, and smoking a joint. Mom turns to me and says, "I want some of that." I call her new doctor, and she says,
"Look, she won't get out of bed. Give her anything she wants."
So we shared a joint. Before we finish, Mom says, "Let's go to the living room and watch TV."
This began the discovery. At first, we learned the U.S. Department of Health has held a patent on cannabinoids since 1998 as
neuroprotectants, for example, in limiting neurological damage following ischemic insults, such as stroke and trauma, or in the treatment of neurodegenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's disease.
That's patent 6630507B1.
And that led us to discovering the mountain of evidence that actually cannabis helps dementia.
A simple PubMed search reveals study after study after study that cannabis eases the terrible symptoms of dementia better than anything else available on the market.
A documentary called The Scientist shows that every nursing home in Israel uses cannabis medicine for their elderly.
Mainstream media sources show that there are facilities in Northern California and New York State that are currently using full-spectrum cannabis oil for people living with dementia.
33 state departments of health list Alzheimer's disease or other neurodegenerative diseases on their qualifying conditions for medical cannabis.
How is it that 2 film workers turned family caregivers can uncover this life-changing information, but doctors seem willfully ignorant?
Whatever happened to first do no harm?
We stopped going to the doctors who had advised so strongly against cannabis and prescribed all the ineffective, off-label black box drugs.
They were obviously not aware of the science of the last 20 years, nor did they seem interested.
This was tricky because we didn't have many assets to speak of, and Mom was on Medicare and Medicaid.
But her new, fresh out of medical school vegan doctor was really open-minded. I guess she believed in the power of plants because she certainly didn't learn about cannabis in medical school.
Mom had greater focus and interaction when she was medicated with cannabis.
She laughed, smiled, and communicated with us. It was like she dropped into her body and was able to connect better.
Cannabis helped Mom have a carefree attitude about losing her mind.
You need that. But cannabis is expensive. Medicare doesn't pay for it, and it's not covered by any insurance.
As the disease progressed and our resources were drained, we had to move Mom into a facility.
Despite our absurd preference to keep her at home with us.
The nursing home said they would throw us out if we used cannabis, a Schedule I drug. The first nursing home Mom was in actually did throw her out.
After drug testing her for marijuana and telling me to knock it off, or they would ask us to leave.
They kicked Mom out after she drew the foul when another woman pushed her from behind as they were walking to an activity. Mom spun around and slapped her in the face in retaliation.
My mom was a leader of the girls' gang growing up in Brooklyn. The facility wasn't medicating her agitation and aggression appropriately.
Or at all.
And wouldn't allow us to medicate her either. So what did they expect?
We were forced to move Mom into another facility where she lived for 5 years.
The last 2, confined to a bed, crumpled and contracted, betrayed by her broken brain. She was trapped in her body, at the mercy of an understaffed and profit-driven Medicaid nursing home.
After Mom became nonverbal in the facility, she was even more easily ignored, force-fed, and left wet for hours.
Until I was off work and I could get there to fix it. Every day, for years. It was a nightmare that only her transition could alleviate. After a 9-year-long journey through dementia, my mom passed on February 1st, 2019, and is now free at last.
By the end, it was painfully obvious that her brain had been destroyed by Alzheimer's disease.
Always my greatest teacher, my mom was once a brilliant and stunning beauty. A glamour girl of 60s Hollywood, a commercial realtor, an acting teacher who inspired, talent manager who worked her ass off for her clients until she lost her mind. Cannabis medicine helped ease my mom's symptoms from the moment we started using it until her last breath, but only when she had access to it.
In January 2019, the World Health Organization called for cannabis to be rescheduled internationally and admitted it was erroneously put on the Controlled Substances Act Schedule I of drugs in 1971.
That they'd been wrong for decades?
Cannabis has been proven to help all the difficult symptoms of dementia, and it's a plant that grows all around the world, even in one's own backyard.
Modern medicine is failing millions of people living with dementia, their families, and loved ones. We don't have to be restricted by draconian ideas on plant medicine any longer.
However, because cannabis remains on the Controlled Substances Act, doctors lack education and are afraid of losing their licensing.
And researchers have a very hard time funding studies and getting the plant material from the one and only government-approved grower in Mississippi at the National Institute on Drug Abuse.
Public pressure can change this. The suffering of millions of people living with dementia could be alleviated today with cannabis therapeutics. If government studies under prohibition taught us anything, it's that this plant has a mild side effect profile, has never killed anyone, and it contains patented antioxidants and neuroprotectants.
With no end in sight for Alzheimer's disease and related dementias, we must expand where we search for solutions to one of the scariest threats to human health and our national and global economy.
Perhaps the reason there's no effective treatment for dementia nor its terrible symptoms is because of the Schedule I of drugs.
Maybe at least part of the answer to complex brain issues is in plant medicine. Maybe all plants should be allowed to be studied before the cost of care eclipses the GDP.
We must be bold.
Like Dr. Ethan Russo, who we first met at a big medical cannabis conference where he was presenting findings on how cannabis helps balance the gut microbiome.
Dr. Russo is a board-certified neurologist, psychopharmacology researcher, and former senior medical advisor to GW Pharmaceuticals, the maker of Epidiolex, the FDA-approved epilepsy medicine made from cannabidiol, or CBD. He was director of research and development for the International Cannabis and Cannabinoids Institute.
We had a chance to sit down with Dr. Russo briefly at a conference shortly after his article, Cannabis Therapeutics and the Future of Neurology, was published in Frontiers in Integrative Neuroscience.
Here's Dr. Russo chatting with us about how cannabis helps dementia.
We're here with Dr. Ethan Russo, neurological researcher, scientist, and all over badass in the field of neuroscience and cannabis.
The problem right now is there have been individual studies of various cannabinoids, specifically THC and cannabidiol, in relation to mechanisms, the pathophysiology of Alzheimer's disease. There really haven't been any large clinical studies, however, and that's what we really need now. There have been a few studies specifically of synthetic THC as Marinol, specifically to look at agitation and sleep in Alzheimer's with positive results. But as most people know, THC alone is a very poorly tolerated drug, whereas cannabis that contains other components, particularly cannabidiol and a good terpenoid content, is going to be much better tolerated and potentially really contribute much more usefully to the benefits of cannabis in this patient group. Specifically, one of the things that I'd like to be able to demonstrate is that the terpenoid called pinene has an effect actually to boost short-term memory. Drugs like pinene, which are acetylcholinesterase inhibitors, boost the amount of acetylcholine in the brain. That's the memory molecule. And so this, in conjunction with the other benefits of THC and other cannabis components, really presents a sort of multifocal approach to treating Alzheimer's. On the one hand, treating symptoms, but also we have good lab evidence that THC and CBD can interfere with the buildup of abnormal proteins in the brain. That's one of the hallmarks of the disorder.
Right. It's my thinking that more studies need to be done for the treatment of the disease, but right now there are 33 states where people living in those states could go to a dispensary and get something for their symptoms.
Right. Well, this is a good demonstration that this is a bottom-up movement. What I mean by that is that, unfortunately, physicians have been slow to get on board with cannabis, and the real movement is by patients and their families demonstrating to their doctors that, hey, if you see a benefit here, as compared to last month when she wasn't on this, it's because of cannabis, because we're not doing anything differently except for that. So it's going to be a slow evolution. With that, we need progress with the laws as well, so that we can do the studies properly and that this is more generally available.
What do you think about hemp in the Farm Bill passing? Do you think that's going to help move us?
It may, but in this instance, we need some THC in the materials. That's what really treats the agitation and helps with sleep. It is a combination of THC, CBD, and other components that presents the best promise for really making a meaningful difference in treating Alzheimer's disease clinically.
Wow. Let me just repeat that. It is the combination of THC, CBD, and other components that presents the best promise for really making a meaningful difference in treating Alzheimer's disease clinically.
Emphasis added. Dr. Russo is a member of the Society of Cannabis Clinicians and served as study physician to GW Pharmaceuticals' 3 Phase 3 clinical trials of Sativex.
Sativex is a 1-to-1 CBD to THC oral mucosal spray that delivers 10 milligrams of medicine per dose. And it's legal by prescription in more than 30 countries, but not the U.S.
Sativex is being used in an exciting clinical trial for Alzheimer's at King's College London this year. We can't thank Dr. Russo enough for all his research and perseverance.
For real, seriously. That review article that first introduced us to his work was mind-blowing because it cited all the studies that show how cannabis helps Alzheimer's disease as well as many other difficult neurological conditions.
At the end of the Alzheimer's section, he breaks down which cannabis compounds address which symptoms.
I was really impressed that he was so generous with his knowledge in the article and then in person. I wish we had known about Dr. Russo and his work when my mom was first diagnosed.
Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to connecting with him again.
Thanks for joining us for our premiere episode of Cannabis Helps Dementia. Be sure to download and like us on iTunes.
And please share this series with anyone you know in relationship with dementia.
You can download and listen to episode 2 with world-renowned dementia expert Teepa Snow and 3 with Dr. Jeffrey Hergenrather right now.
Teepa Snow is an occupational therapist with 40 years of clinical practice. She founded a revolutionary approach to support and engage people experiencing changes in brain function and their care partners. I've taken a few of Teepa's trainings, and they helped me connect with my mom when I thought it was no longer possible. It really was life-changing stuff.
Teepa shares her experience on how cannabis medicine helps people living with dementia. Episode 3 is with Dr. Jeffrey Hergenrather.
We met Dr. Hergenrather at the same conference where we first met Dr. Russo. We bonded over a terrible panel on cannabis and Alzheimer's.
Dr. Hergenrather has used plant medicine throughout his career and works with assisted living facilities in Northern California who are using full-spectrum cannabis oil for people living with dementia.
Great information from a clinician practicing this medicine for a long time. In 1999, Dr. Hergenrather also co-founded with Dr. Todd McCorea the Society of Cannabis Clinicians.
So go download episodes 2 and 3 of Cannabis Helps Dementia on iTunes and be sure to like and share.
Do you want to tell your story of how cannabis helps dementia? Drop us a note or connect with us on the socials.
Check out the Society of Cannabis Clinicians website and find real medical professionals familiar with cannabis medicine in your area.
Because you remember, we're not doctors, just family caregivers turned advocates.
And don't forget, download, like, and share what you learned. Cannabis Helps Dementia.
I'm unmuted.
Awesome.
Hi. Hi, guys.
Hey, that was episode 1 of Cannabis Helps Dementia podcast over on iTunes and many other places.
Many other places.
But if you go over to iTunes right now, and I drop the link in the chat, and hit on episode 1.
That'd be awesome.
Actually, I think you have to actually open it up on Apple Podcasts.
Yes.
In order to rate and review.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. So are you saying I should go to Apple Podcasts right now?
No, I'm sorry. iTunes.
iTunes. I should go to iTunes right now.
You should go to iTunes.
And
well, you see, if you
rate
go
and review.
If you go to that link,
first episode.
yeah, if you go to that link, there is a button that says
the link in the chat.
The link in the chat.
That'll
take you
one.
to the preview page.
Okie doke.
You see on the
I
Apple.
I can't leave a review. That's not cool.
And then,
but any of you might be able to do that.
And then you can click on the listen on Apple Podcasts, and it'll open up iTunes. and then iTunes will bring up our 3 episodes, you see. And then you can go to each, and you can rate, click on the ratings. Oh, you know what? I should show that window when I come back next time. I'll show the iTunes window next time and how you do it.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So that was episode 1. That was our story. And that was a little, a short interview we did with Dr. Ethan Russo at an Emerald Cup when we first began our quest to find out how cannabis helps dementia. And he mentioned, or we mentioned in that podcast, that a simple PubMed search comes up with some information that not many people know about.
Dr. Russo said there have been a few studies that show blah, 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 that study Marinol and all that. Well, these are the few studies he's talking about. This giant book is full of the studies that show how cannabis helps dementia. All of these studies, even the single molecule, even the shitty dirt weed helps dementia. So these are the studies that show it. Simple PubMed search, organized by year. I bring this when I go lobbying. I was fortunate enough to print it out at a prop house that is friendly to our cause. So they financed the printing of this tome. And yeah, it's there.
Much of it is in vitro. Much of it is with rats. Much of it is
sure, of course.
Much of it is published, published
from Ferners
journals. They're not clinical trials. So and then of course there's the international studies. I mean, there are thousands and thousands of studies about cannabis and cancer.
Oh yeah.
Nixon shut down the cancer studies, as you will hear in episode 3.
That's right.
From Dr. Jeffrey Hergenrather, who was there when it happened, when it transitioned from not just illegal, but to a drug war, and that all the cancer studies were shut down, and all of the positive research was ended, destroyed. So that's just a little teaser for episode 3. That's a little teaser for episode 3 over there on the iTunes. As a matter of fact. If you go over there, you can do that. But we're going to play episode 2. We should play episode 2.
Yeah.
So just real quick, you can also follow the new show over on Twitter at Cannabis Helps. On Instagram, we are at Cannabis Helps Dementia. And on Facebook, we are CHD Podcast, because you can't use the word cannabis in your username on Facebook. Because, of course, you can't advertise anything about cannabis on Facebook. You can't promote any of these posts. So please share wherever. If you're on one of the Facebook channels, share this with somebody on Facebook. And on YouTube, of course, share it wherever you can on all the socials. And tag us at Cannabis Helps on Twitter. If you can share the broadcast right now over there. And we still haven't figured out the Instagram thing. Although Chela is now Hootsuiting.
Yes.
Hootsuiting.
If you guys probably, you may not know, there's a tool called Hootsuite that you can connect a whole bunch of your social media platforms into and construct your post in that app and then just send it from there. So you never have to go to the app to do your posting, because that's where I get hung up. So, this is great because it formats all your photos and it tells you how many letters and all the things that you need to do. Mind you, I think I've done 1 post, maybe 2.
Oh, sorry.
But anyway, I'm learning. It's a very exciting time. I love learning new things. Learning new things is super fun. So Hootsuite is helping me conquer the social media beast, and I'm excited about it. So.
Chela is now excited about social media.
Yeah, it's exciting because now I feel like I have the right tool for the job.
With her new tool.
I hate not having the right tool for the job. I have historically done props and set dressing for a living, and having the right tool is essential to do our jobs. And I'm pretty shitty about it when there's not the right tool to do the gig. Like, I won't do it.
Well, it's a lot of people don't do social media on multiple platforms because you need some, because it just takes so much time.
Or they end up hiring somebody or whatever.
And we're old, so it's not that easy with the fingers.
It's true. It's not cool.
Fingers don't move as fast. But you know what? Cannabis helps dementia when you get old. So we're good. And that's what we're talking about here today. This is the Reefer Revolution Cannabis Helps Dementia crossover show. You may have noticed the change in the name of the YouTube channel, Cannabis Saves the World. That is the actual URL we have for YouTube on our YouTube show. So that's the name of the channel. And Reefer Revolution is a show that may or may not come back. It's sort of
I think it'll come in and out as needed.
In and out as needed. We probably talk about a little bit of news today because there is some news. So we might take a little bit about news here and there. Maybe we'll talk about a news story when we come back after hearing Teepa Snow in episode 2 of Cannabis Helps Dementia podcast over on iTunes, guys. Follow the link. I'll drop it in the chat again. Go over to iTunes. Just tap or open up your iTunes. Put in Cannabis Helps Dementia podcast. It'll come right up. Get on there. Give us a rating of a review. If you so inclined, a rating if you can, for sure, a review if you so inclined. And we're trying to, it's a big momentum push to get us up to the new and noteworthy. I have no idea if we're going to get anywhere near it, but it's fun to try.
Might as well try.
It's fun to try. And then you guys get to subscribe to our podcast. Also, it's over on Anchor FM we are using to distribute our podcast, make our podcasts, hold our podcasts all free, and they will find sponsors for you. They are sponsoring our podcast right now, and they are looking for other sponsors for our podcast. You can also support the show over there at Anchor FM/Cannabis Helps Dementia, Anchor.fm/Cannabis Helps Dementia, for as little as 99 cents a month. If you can do it in this pandemic, don't feel like you need to. Sharing is the best. Sharing is the best because we want to get the information out.
Yeah, it's urgent that we get this information out to the world.
And
really.
You can leave us a message. Leave us a message over on Anchor FM. But today we're pushing to get some buzz on iTunes and maybe get some momentum up there. So we're going to bring you episode 2, and we have super chats now. So hey, we've never had a super chat before. I had no idea what it is.
How that works.
So if you're the first one, you would be the first super chat ever. I'm just saying. I do them, but I've never. Well, I know what they are because I've done them on other shows, but we've never been able to do them on our show because we've never been able to monetize the show. So funny story.
Hi, Vegan Metro.
Vegan Metro, thank you for sharing the podcast, my friend. Anthony is tweeting about us and sharing the Cannabis Helps Dementia podcast with his crew out there in NV in the heat of the desert. Our nieces live out there. Thanks for jumping in. Thanks, everybody. We are going to get into episode 2 of Cannabis Helps Dementia. And while you're listening, go on over to iTunes, plug it in, give us a review, give us a rate. And enjoy Teepa Snow on how cannabis helps dementia.
Mm-hmm. Hi, and welcome to Cannabis Helps Dementia. I'm Chela.
I'm Dave. And right up front, we'd like to say we're not doctors or medical professionals, and nothing you hear in this podcast should be considered medical advice.
Right.
We're not experts. But throughout this podcast series, you'll hear from doctors, nurses, researchers, administrators, other caregivers, and people living with dementia about how cannabis helps.
Like it did for our family. After my mom was diagnosed with dementia, we were thrust into family caregiving and became fierce advocates for people living with dementia, which is how we learned about the work of Teepa Snow.
Teepa is a world-renowned dementia expert and occupational therapist with 40 years of clinical practice in all different settings. Teepa founded a revolutionary approach to support and engage people experiencing changes in brain function and their care partners. It's called Positive Approach to Care.
I, of course, read her book and watched all of her free videos on YouTube before taking her certified training course and seeing her in person. Because of her occupational therapist perspective, she teaches us how to physically connect with our loved ones when words fail. It was really beautiful and life-changing stuff.
In this episode of Cannabis Helps Dementia, Teepa shares her experience with how cannabis medicine can help people living with dementia.
Teepa, you work with care partners and people living with dementia all over the world. In Canada, they've been using CBD in care facilities for years. In California, cannabis medicine has technically been available since 1996 for any condition. So what's been your experience with people living with dementia using cannabis medicine?
So initially people have really had to keep it under wraps. And so it was there was much more chatter and back and forth once you start talking with people who are living with dementia and their care providers than you'll hear out in public. Because people have been trying things for some time when pain is unremitting, when sleep won't come, when anxiety is so high people can't think. When they've tried other meds and they don't know what else to do, everything they try is a mess, or they find that what they've tried makes things worse, then they try things. And so what we know is anecdotally, people find frequently that adjusting dosages is really challenging if you can't get high quality, measurable types of cannabis that you can monitor. What you're giving is what you mean to be giving. And the challenge for most families and most individuals who've been doing this historically, because they've been doing it quite honestly, illegally in many cases, because that's the only way they could do it, is that they were doing the best they could. And now that we're starting to hear and actually report out what's going on with cannabis, I think we're starting to see a bit of a shift. And I think the shift is significant. I think there are more and more medical providers that are starting to say, you know what, it's a chemical like any other chemical. And there's not some magic thing about it. It's just, it should be treated and managed that way. And our challenge is just that there's such this stigma attached to it, just like there's a stigma attached to dementia. And maybe the good part is because there's a stigma to both, you know, people are willing to take risks that may not be taken in other situations. But the reality is we don't have a lot of things to offer people that are reasonable things to offer. So why wouldn't you try something that has very reasonable side effects and manageable often side effects? And many of the effects that it has, if you're using it accurately, you may find it may actually help appetite, but it doesn't have some other issues with it. It may have some other issues with it, in which case you sort of reevaluate. I mean, just like you should with anything you're trying to use to help. But I have seen some fairly remarkable differences in people's lives and the quality of their lives by being willing to go over that line, I guess is what we call it, about what people are okay with and what makes them anxious and nervous.
Teepa, you've said that it takes 25 years for the medical community to embrace something new. There's no cure for dementia nor an effective treatment on the horizon. 33 states have Alzheimer's or related neurodegenerative diseases on their list of qualifying conditions for medical cannabis. The U.S. Department of Health holds a patent for cannabis specifically to protect against neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's disease. Families are falling apart. Why aren't more people trying it?
Yeah, and I think this idea that it takes so long for a new medication, a new treatment, a new way of doing things to become the common practice, we've got to break that 25-year thing. And it's just, that's the history. That's what we know about heart treatment. That's what we know about cancer treatments. It takes so long to get people to change what they do because it's habit structure. So how do we do that? And I think one of the interesting things about dementia is people are less excited and interested in dementia. So that may be one of two things. It means that it will take even longer than 25 years, or people will be willing to take chances and allow people to do things. Now, you know, some of the recent changes about let's fast track some things. They're doing it with the drug companies. So the question is, will they start being willing to do it with cannabis? And can we get more practitioners interested and excited about alternatives? And let's move away from the things we know that don't work well, because we're still trying to use them. And the recent thing that people have done to try to reduce the use of antipsychotics in long-term care facilities, if we look carefully at the data, all too often what it's showing us is there's been a subsequent and equivalent increase in anti-anxiolytics, but they're the medications that have been shown to have side effects of increased falls, decreased alertness and arousal, increased tears, decreased ability to socialize, more drowsiness. So it's okay, so now we have another drug that we're going to have to deal with. So maybe we should start looking somewhere else.
Maybe we should.
Yeah.
There's only 70 drugs in the pipeline for Alzheimer's disease, but 1,100 for cancer.
Yeah.
And Eli Lilly pulled the plug on
And they pulled the plug on some because when they found out that beta amyloid plaque does not appear to be the causative agent, then all of a sudden everybody's back up and going, okay, so what are we going to do? Treat tau pathologies? Are we instead treating glial cell issues? I mean, they're back to sort of beginning guidelines again about, in some areas, what is it we're treating exactly? What are we trying to stop or change or modify? Which of these cycles are we trying to intervene at? So I think we're a long way to go if we think about all the variations of dementia to having cures. So we're going to be a long time figuring out how do we offer care that's the right kind of care. And part of it is offering people the right support for the care they're delivering. And, you know, this is where cannabis has a role. And this idea of, well, let's separate the elements out. Because is it all about, are people worried about hallucinogens? I mean, is that it? Because we need to educate them. I mean, obviously there's a huge problem with education about, well, we've got all kinds of cannabinoids. Let's sort of break this apart and see what people are scared of. What are you scared of? Because it's about fear and distrust and this whole, what is it people are so scared people are going to become addicted to? I mean, I'm trapped in a building with other people and I'm not allowed out and I can't do many things. So I'll be wasting my time if I take cannabis. I mean, it's a very interesting phenomena of judgment, which I don't want to give people something if it causes harm, but show me where you've tried it and it's causing harm, and then let's talk. But that's not even what we're doing. We're just not willing to try something, and yet we are offering people things that have demonstrated to cause harm. But it's just this boundary marker that we have a hard time moving. And I don't actually know why people have the same kind of reaction. Whereas if I said, okay, so we're going to give you a fentanyl patch, people would be like, okay. I mean, it's like, we want to talk about something that's highly addictive and quite dangerous. Let's talk about that. But, you know, that's prescribed with amazing regularity, whereas something that might loosen and allow somebody to move their hands, or allow somebody to be more flexible, or allow somebody to be more comfortable, or allow somebody to just be okay, is not really acceptable.
Probably because they haven't found how to make money with it.
Well, that's a possibility too. I mean, and that's always a backdoor kind of question, is what's holding us up? Is it this moral problem that people have, or is there also a financial element to it that might be underpinning some of this? And I think it's so difficult to get straight answers, and it's so difficult. I do think we're starting to see more research, and I do think we're starting to see people go, okay, well, you know what, I'm not seeing harm, so let's just go ahead, and if people are willing and interested in doing this, let's just do it. It's legal.
Nice.
You know, and I think that's where things are starting to shift. We're seeing more and more areas and states and people just saying, I don't know what else to do. And it's like, well, do you want to give it a try? And people who are living, particularly with Lewy body, find for many of them, it is the difference between living decently, living well, or living miserably.
For my mom, it was a huge difference. It was miserable or living with the family and enjoying life.
And having time to be, an ability to see you and not to be so distressed that you can't process anything, and being able to get some sleep.
Yeah.
You know, with Lewy body, getting sleep is such a huge part of having a good quality life. And the number of people that I work with that have Lewy body and use cannabis and can sleep, and they can't do it any other way unless they are not able to move, because then we have to give them things, and the whole series of things that people and families are provided with. Well, if you want the hallucinations not to be so awful, you're just going to have to potentially put up with no mobility. And it's like, well, is there any other option? It's like, well, let's try some something that might not have that impact, that side effect on the extrapyramidal system. Yeah, but it is interesting that certain groups are more supportive. We see a lot more over in Europe for sure, more interest in doing studies and research. And in England, they're certainly also looking at the same kind of issues. But, you know, it's just hard to get people to pay attention.
King's College London is doing a study at the end of the year with Sativex. I'm very excited about that study because it's going to be 1-to-1 and they're going to be doing 10 milligrams, which is the dose that the doctors in Santa Rosa are using in facilities. 10 milligrams of 1-to-1, 2 to 3 times a day.
Yeah. I know. And it's like, they're not all doped up, guys. This is, again, this whole like, but it's like, okay, we're talking drops here, guys. We're not talking about smoking cigarettes. You know, it's not like you're doing a joint and mom's going to be smell like marijuana.
Yeah. But even if they did, though, smoking a joint has actually never shown any cancer causing any problems.
I know.
And the medicine gets there faster.
It's faster. And it's just sort of like, okay, so we try to, I think what I'm saying is we try to jump over the fences that they build and say, okay, well, if not that, how about this? Can we do this? How about if we did it this way? Because we're just trying to figure out what's the barrier that makes this so hard for people to be willing to treat with. And the answer is, I don't know. I really don't, because if you talk to different people, it's like, yeah, no, I use it in my practice, and I use it in my practice, but there are too many people who don't.
Education.
Yeah, I mean, it's reaching out and getting them to pay attention. So have you given it a try? Well, it's just not our prescribing list. Well, why not? Well, it's just not. Well, who creates the prescribing list? Well, we meet and do that. Okay, well, maybe bringing it up might be an alternative. Well, I just don't know who would bring it up.
How about you?
I know. It's like, okay, so what if you were to bring it up? Well, I just don't prescribe with it. And it's like, okay, so it feels like a circle. And it's like somebody else has to go first. Because, and I don't know how much of this might be generated from fear of the opioid epidemic phenomena. Where they don't want to get caught in this next cycle of we start doing something. And in their mind, it's similar. Because I'm now doing cannabis. And you're like, you're doing cannabis? Were you one of the opioid people? And it's like, no. I work with post-acute, the Society for Post-Acute Care. And there have been now 4 or 5 webinars on the use of cannabis. So it's becoming more of a common language. And people who are hospice and palliative care are certainly starting to have conversations. But, you know, we need it faster, and we need it particularly for dementia, I think. Because that's the place where I see people lagging behind in being willing to explore. And let's do trials. And I'm not talking clinical trials. I'm talking individuals having an opportunity to try something just like you would if you're like, well, let's try on some Tylenol. Okay, how'd that go? We didn't see any change. All right, well, how about we try it on cannabis? And there's this pause, and it's like, well, why would we do that? And it's like, well, it's been identified as a pain reliever. Well, I guess I'll have to look at the data. And it's like, okay. All right, we could do that. They want to use what they know. And so we got to the place where Tylenol was what they used rather than aspirin. You know, because they used to give bufferin like nobody's business, and then we had everybody with such acid problems with their stomach. Well, then we could add another med to that, another med to that, but then people went, oh, well, how about Tylenol? It's like, oh, okay. We could try it. And it's like, so now that becomes what they do. But when it doesn't meet the need, they haven't yet got, oh, okay, well, let's try cannabis. There's still that pause as soon as you get it out of your mouth. And it's almost like and again, I wonder, what about if we just try CBD oil?
Yes.
You know, is that the first step? I mean, do we have to take it in baby steps so that it's, as crazy as it is, it's just what's acceptable? They'll handle baby steps. They can't take big boy steps. It's like baby steps are where we're at. But it's a step, and it's better than nothing. It may not be what should be, but that's pretty much the case with dementia all over the place anyway, is we aren't doing what we could do. We're doing some of what we can do, but not everything that could be done.
Yeah. With prevention as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Risk reduction, prevention, management, and comfort care. You know, comfort care should be coming way sooner in dementia than it does.
Day one.
Yeah. And not just comfort for the person, comfort for families too. Because this is a really hard condition to live through. Yeah.
4 out of 5 families.
4 out of 5 families are falling apart. Yeah. And people are no longer families by the time it's over. I mean, and they're in court and everything else. And it's just like, so this is a painful condition. And so at least we should be offering comfort to people who, there's no reason not to. I just think it's going to be way too long getting a shift, but we're pushing. But if you push too hard, then the door slams shut again. Yeah. And so it's that, okay, well, let me figure out what you can hear. What can I get you to hear that is okay? And if it's just cannabis oil, okay, well, then let's start with CBD oil. Can we at least start with that? Let's try it. How about just on the people with Lewy body? I mean, and you start with where you can get a foothold, and then you try to be really careful that nobody does something that then triggers a negative something, so that then there's this negative remembrance that people have, and it's like, yeah, I don't want to do that again, because see, then she just went off the deep end, quote unquote, kind of thing. So it's like this monitoring, but there's this, it shouldn't have to be that way, but there's this edge whenever you're making these recommendations to try to ease it in so that you don't get a pushback, because you don't want to get a door slammed on somebody who, have we tried, have you guys thought about trying cannabis? Really? It's like, yeah, I'm just wondering. I mean, it may be worth a try. And I guess what concerns me is if we won't do it over the counter, people are going to go under the counter. And that's what worries me about people seeking, if you can't get medical quality, what are you going to get? Whatever you can find. And there's stuff out there now that's incredibly powerful stuff, but it may not be the right stuff.
The stuff that seems to help most people living with dementia is a 1-to-1 balanced ratio, not something that's super high in THC. That won't hurt them.
No.
But it won't give them the relief.
Right, that you're really looking for. And
it add to their paranoia.
Paranoia.
Yeah, that's the difficulty with Lewy body, is if you do THC and somebody gets hold of something that is pretty high in content because they had to go and seek it through not authorized means, then you don't know for sure what you're getting. And if you end up with something that's very high, then things that were causing you some distress could be terrifying. And unfortunately, that's not a good thing. Right. And then we just perpetuate the issues. And it's like, well, hang on, because what was your source? And that's the problem.
Always know your source.
Yeah.
Always know your source.
And CBD is even trickier now.
Oh.
Because of all the sources.
Hemp oil, yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Just go down to the local drugstore and you can get what
you're buying your dementia medicine from a 7-Eleven.
Yeah.
Probably not the best idea.
Or, the dollar store.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely not.
Yeah. But, people, what's the training and the education? It's like, well, CBD is CBD, right?
No.
Yeah. No, it's not. Are you sure? Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's really too bad about that, because that's not what people understand. Is, well, I got a bottle in the mail, and it's like,
CBD on it.
yeah. Have you ever looked at the vanilla bottle, the vanilla flavoring? Is it artificial? Is it taste like vanilla? Is it vanilla? Is it from vanilla? Is it extract, or is it, same idea? And it goes back to, why is that a Schedule 1?
It's insane.
I mean, it makes no sense whatsoever. It makes sense fiscally for alcohol and for cigarettes.
And Big Pharma.
And Big Pharma. Yeah, that's what it makes a big difference for. Because there is fiscal reasons to not add something that is low cost to the mix.
It's a huge disruptor.
For every industry.
Sure it is. Well, I mean,
Plastic, oil,
I mean, look at everything.
Food.
Yeah.
as well as alcohol.
Yeah. I mean, it's the whole 9 yards. So
The
I
alcohol
think
industry was very much behind
Oh.
cannabis prohibition when after they got out of prohibition, they're like,
Yeah.
yeah, put those guys in.
no, lock them up for a bit because that's going to make it better. Yeah. Yeah, and that's been the case for ages. So I think that's part of that, making it difficult to make the transition.
Yeah, cannabis is not good for big pharma. True story. Teepa Snow is such an incredible teacher. We can't thank her enough for her contribution to dementia care training.
And taking the time to chat with us about how cannabis helps dementia. Be sure to check out teepasnow.com for details about her positive approach to dementia care.
Dude, it's hard to wrap my head around the glacial pace of adopting new methods. People are so slow to change.
Yeah. And if 70 years of prohibition has taught us anything, it's that cannabis has a mild side effect profile and it hasn't killed anybody.
Drug warriors are pretty pissed that they haven't found any serious harm.
And they keep trying. Thanks for joining us for Cannabis Helps Dementia. Be sure to download and like us on iTunes.
And please share this podcast with anyone you know in relationship with dementia.
You can download and listen to episode 3 with Dr. Jeffrey Hergenrather now.
We met Dr. Hergenrather at our first big medical cannabis conference in 2018. We bonded over a terribly disappointing panel on cannabis and Alzheimer's.
Dr. Hergenrather has used plant medicine throughout his long and distinguished career and works with families and assisted living facilities in Northern California who are using full-spectrum cannabis oil for people living with dementia.
Great information from a clinician practicing this medicine for a long time. In 1999, Dr. Hergenrather also co-founded with Dr. Todd Mikoria the Society of Cannabis Clinicians.
So go download episode 3 of Cannabis Helps Dementia on iTunes and be sure to like and share.
Do you want to tell your story of how cannabis helps dementia? Drop us a note or connect with us on the socials.
Check out the Society of Cannabis Clinicians website and find real medical professionals familiar with cannabis medicine in your area.
Because you remember, we're not doctors, just family caregivers turned advocates.
And don't forget, download, like, and share what you've learned. Cannabis Helps Dementia. Go on over to the iTunes. The iTunes there. And rate, review, download, share. And check out, we got some action going over there. Got some action going over on the iTunes. Woohoo!
Yeah, man. Thank you so much for building all that for us, Dave. Oh, speaking of
Yes?
building, do you want to show our friends the website you put together?
Oh.
Dave built us a little website, too.
It's true.
It's pretty exciting.
I
dragged
and dropped a website.
And it's awesome, and I'm super stoked about it.
I drug and dropped.
And I really love that there's a glossary in there because we gave these episodes to some of our family, older family, and not in the know people. And they alerted us to the idea that they have no idea what we're talking about in so many things. So we put a glossary in there. So I'm stoked about that. It could not fit in the full show notes, but they can always link to it.
Well, and eventually there will be each episode will have its own dedicated page with complete show notes and links and all that stuff. I just hadn't gotten to it yet.
Yeah, but
I'm building them. I'm building those pages.
I appreciate you're building of the page.
I know you do. I know you do.
I do.
And there's of course the website is
Oh no, what's happening? Shush.
Hello. is cannabishelpsdementia.com is the URL. And there we have Mom in the middle there. Over on the left, there's Dr. Russo and Chela at, that was at EC2.
Episode 2.
TEC, yeah, episode 1.
Yeah,
but
right.
so that picture was from the Emerald Cup, the
Yes.
second one we went to.
Yes.
But that's episode 1, Dr. Russo. There's a little picture of Mom enjoying some watermelon,
Ice cream.
cantaloupe, I think that is
Cantaloupe,
actually.
yes.
She loved, honeydew.
Yes.
Loved honeydew, especially after little cannabis. And there's Mom and the drawing. That's Dr. Hergenrather. You're about to hear about
Yes.
you heard about Dr. Hergenrather, and you're going to hear him in episode 3 coming up. And you just heard Teepa Snow. You can follow us on all the socials from there. Our little teaser trailer is there, and you can find all the episodes there too, as well as that cool little glossary of terms that you might have heard on the podcast. And if you're not so akamai, on cannabis stuff, there you go. Glossary right there on the front page, plus our RSS feed, and more to come for that page, that website. So we've got a website. We've got the iTunes. So go on over to the iTunes. I dropped episode 2 link in there. I will do it again. I will get the link to episode 2 on the preview of iTunes. But if you open up your iTunes and just put in Cannabis Helps Dementia, you'll get there. And we're asking you for a nice rating and possibly a review.
And share.
And share. And to get a little buzz going about Cannabis Helps Dementia podcast this weekend. So that was episode 3. And you were saying a few things in the chat, Chela, during.
Yes.
That I noticed that were
You
was
noticed
being
me
addressed.
talking?
Well, I was seeing some of the comments that were made.
We've been together a long time.
And we haven't killed each other in 8 weeks.
Yeah.
In the box.
Yeah.
So we're good. We impressed the guy at Bank of America.
Yes. The Bank of America
It's like,
helper guy on the phone.
You guys sound like you're doing all right. Of course we're doing all right. What do you think? Cannabis helps dementia.
Oh, no.
And the story continues.
You guys, I've been talking to my dad a lot
Okay, you
more
want to
lately.
get into it? Okay,
I'm just
here we
going to
go.
touch on it real quick since you brought it up. I think my dad has dementia. And he lives in Italy. And he has no documents to travel. Gave up his green card 3 years ago when Trump was elected. And that wasn't the reason, but it sounded good. The reason is he couldn't figure out how to get it all together to do it. Because I think he has dementia. He hasn't been diagnosed, of course, because he doesn't go to doctors. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. The lady who's sort of managed his life for quite a few years is finished doing that.
Pasta.
And she's got her own stuff too. So anyway, it's a very exciting time in the world. I hope that you are all doing well and eating well and being healthy and
feeding your endocannabinoid system.
and nourishing your endocannabinoid system and all of the other systems of your body. So eat lots of vegetables and fruits and stay well and be well.
Because there is a clinical trial going on. There's actually a couple clinical trials going on. One in Alberta, a couple in Israel, with CBD. This one is clinical trial study the effects of steroid cannabidiol treatment on hospitalized COVID patients. So, does cannabis save the world? Stay tuned. Stay tuned.
I will tell.
Because this all, I mean, why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't the CBD companies be like, why don't we figure this out?
Yeah.
And there are a lot of companies that have great scientists attached to them, like Russo and other scientists.
Russo's new company.
And that
Working
is,
on it.
And that company, it is, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and that this one is with another big university and another hospital in Israel. And so, who knows? And the cannabis industry is essential.
Yep.
That's been determined. Many states. Delivery. It's like, oh yeah, we need that too. The fight is, you can't. It's the legalization efforts have kind of had a kibosh thrown on them. Although there's a group in Montana that is going to appeal a decision to this, I think it's in Montana Supreme Court, state Supreme Court, on getting electronic signatures to get on the ballot. So, because of course signature gathering is no more. So, cannabis can still be in the ball game here, folks. Providing relief, providing a powerful endocannabinoid system and immune system. We heard a great webinar with some real amazing
Julie Love was there.
hot shots. Jilly Love was there, and all the other doctors that weren't in there were in the chat.
Dr. Mike was there. Dr. Barry Gordon was there.
The amazing doctors that weren't in the Zoom were
Dr.
in the
Knox
chat
was
watching
there.
the Zoom.
Mama Dr. Knox was there.
It was crazy how much information was coming out of there, and of course it came up. All of this came up about COVID and cannabis and
also about dementia.
And about
that came up too.
Yeah.
It was amazing. Guys, if you don't know about Healer, healer.com and the Healer channel and the Healer community, you really need to know about it. It's fantastic. It's where all the cool kids hang.
Oh, man, there's a wealth of information. That and the Society of Cannabis Clinicians, and you got everything you need to know and real doctors that can make it work, and with dementia, too. So one other quick news story before we get into our third episode, which features one of those amazing doctors, one of the founding members of the Society of Cannabis Clinicians, Dr. Jeffrey Hergenrather, a real frickin' rock star when it comes to cannabis medicine. And it's funny calling Jeffrey Hergenrather a rock star. He does have a ponytail.
He's got that rock star hair.
But he is the wealth of knowledge and information and his caring and you'll hear it in the podcast, and that's episode 3 coming up. And you can go over to iTunes right now and rate and review us. We would really love if you did that. That would help out a lot. Plus, share it because we're trying to get a little buzz going on the podcast. A little buzz. And we can do super chats now, so that for whatever that's worth. And you can also support the podcast if you appreciate getting the information out, because we've got another 3 in the can that we are going to be putting out. We'll try to get them out once a week. And then we've got a list already of some of those amazing doctors from the Society of Cannabis Clinicians in the bullpen, ready to go. We want to be on the Cannabis Helps Dementia podcast. So they're literally lining up to get on the podcast, which is great. I guess they got some time in their hands. Although the doctors do seem a little busy in many areas. But maybe that's starting to go the other direction. I don't know. Looks like a lot of places were, as far as medically goes, it seems to me that a lot of the healthcare system, though the workers were taxed beyond measure, and in some cases tragically. But as far as like the system itself, as far as rooms, hospital beds, and ventilators and all that, it ended up, I think they had what they needed for the most part, looked like, in this first wave, although it does seem to be still creeping up overall. So it ain't over yet.
Continuing.
It ain't over yet. Some say it'll be 2 years of this nonsense. For wherever it came from, it's here to stay, no matter what. I heard today that they might have hopefully they might have a virus, they might have a vaccine, which might be what this was all about, in June.
Really?
Yeah.
What?
There's a company that
I'm not taking that vaccine.
They're doing trials.
I'll stay in my house.
They're doing trials in England with this stuff they're using, and they think that they're going to have proof of viability in June. So
great.
The
the
vaccine is in the boxcar. That was one of the signs I saw at Michigan.
Those weird protests.
The Michigan, at which Daily Dope was at the Michigan protests, because not everybody, everybody's starting to. More people are starting to question what these health professionals are doing. Anyway, a different show. The AC has come on, which is my cue to move us into episode 3. It is getting warm in LA.
It's too fucking much. Too hot.
It's getting warm in LA. Let's get on to episode 3, shall we? This is episode 3 of the podcast Cannabis Helps Dementia, now available on iTunes.
I'm having a hot flash, you guys.
Quick. Get into the episode. The AC is on. Here we go. We'll see you on the other side of Dr. Hergenrather.
Okay.
All right.
Hi. Dying.
Hi.
Hi, and welcome to Cannabis Helps Dementia. I'm Chela.
I'm Dave. And right up front, we'd like to say we're not doctors or medical professionals, and nothing you hear in this podcast should be considered medical advice.
Right.
We're not experts. But throughout this podcast series, you'll hear from doctors, nurses, researchers, administrators, other caregivers, and people living with dementia about how cannabis helps.
Like it did for our family. After my mom was diagnosed with dementia, we became fierce advocates for people living with dementia, which is how we met Dr. Jeffrey Hergenrather.
We attended our first medical cannabis conference in 2018. It was incredible to see so many medical professionals at a huge university all interested in talking about cannabis and the potential of cannabis medicine.
It was like a cannabis medicine nerd Coachella.
It was really expensive, especially for non-medical professionals.
But we went because there was going to be a panel on cannabis and Alzheimer's that we were really excited about.
That panel was terribly disappointing.
Yeah, but when they opened it up to audience questions, Dr. Hergenrather was the first at the microphone and shared his experience with assisted living facilities in Northern California.
They didn't like that.
I was second and was, of course, compelled to tell the audience that cannabis helps dementia, that there are some studies and lots of anecdotal evidence, including my own mom.
They didn't like that either. But you made your comment in the form of a question.
That's right. I followed the rules and, of course, caught up with Dr. Hergenrather right after.
Dr. Hergenrather has used plant medicine throughout his long and distinguished career and works with families and assisted living facilities in Northern California who are and have been using full-spectrum cannabis oil for years for people living with dementia.
Such valuable information from a clinician practicing cannabis medicine for a long time. In 1999, Dr. Hergenrather co-founded with Dr. Todd McOrea the Society of Cannabis Clinicians.
On the SCC website, cannabisclinicians.org, there's a search tool where you can find cannabis medicine doctors in your area.
The Society of Cannabis Clinicians is such a valuable resource for medical professionals to connect and share latest research findings as well as what's actually happening in clinical practice. I think it's fair to say that Dr. Hergenrather is a cannabis medicine expert.
Yes, absolutely. So without further ado, here's our conversation with Dr. Jeffrey Hergenrather.
So, Dr. Hergenrather, you've known about cannabis medicine since before there was a Controlled Substances Act and Schedule I of drugs. You've used cannabis medicine in your practice even after it became illegal in 1972. How did you start recommending cannabis for patients?
It got more illegal. I was very interested in the 60s and early 70s before the Controlled Substances Act came in. That was under Nixon. And Nixon, he was bigoted and racist, and he had some qualities that made him just horrible. I mean, the things he did against cannabis were completely unethical. I mean, stopping the cancer studies, realizing that cannabis was killing cancer cells and saying, bury this evidence. You know, that's part of our legacy from Nixon. So it got more illegal while I was a medical student. So it went from being not legal to being, now we have a drug war to stop the spread of cannabis. And you know, at that point, the cat was out of the bag. It was the 70s, and things were different. So I went with my wife and living in a school bus to the farm community in Tennessee in the winter of '77. And the rest of the folks that started the commune had arrived there. Well, the first couple hundred started there in 1972. Or earlier, and we carved out a little community in the woods of South Central Tennessee, which was poor, but we loved being there together. It was a great experience, and literally hundreds of our closest friends are still those same people from that experience. It was a neat place to learn about cannabis because within the community, cannabis was revered, and we treated it as a sacrament, and we shared it among those who needed it. And if I felt like somebody really needed cannabis for their medical problem, I would usually tell a clinic lady or a midwife and say, so-and-so needs some cannabis. And then I wasn't involved in actually handling anything. I could just drop a line, and generally that would happen. So people were getting medicine, and mostly it was young adults and children, not children getting cannabis, young adults and children. That was our population curve, with 30s and babies and youngsters. And we had a few people trailing off on the population curve into elderly individuals, 60s, 70s, 80s, a few people. So I was able to see benefit with using cannabis in these older folks, reducing anxiety, helping sleep, some of the things that really point to the fact that, well, what I believe to be a fact, that the endocannabinoid system wears down. It just isn't the same as you get older as it is when you're young. And it may explain a lot of the changes that we find as we age, because people that otherwise didn't have problems like that at all in their younger years, and then they get to be elderly and now they're not sleeping very well at all. Now they're very anxious, and anxious where it's not good. It's go to the hospital with anxiety, kind of anxiousness. And these people may not have been anxious in their youth. And pain is harder to control. And really a number of other conditions that are modulated or that are mitigated by the endocannabinoid system jumping into action. And when this system isn't working as well in the elderly, we know that 2-AG and some of the natural cannabinoids aren't found in the same concentrations in the elderly and in Alzheimer's dementia. So we have evidence that this system's wearing down. And so we can use cannabis to our benefit to augment that natural system. It just makes sense.
There's so many things we can do to support our endocannabinoid system, like eating leafy greens, getting quality sleep, exercising regularly. But most of these things, in an American lifestyle anyway, are sorely neglected. Does a lifetime of neglect damage our endocannabinoid system?
I think that's true.
Yeah.
And, a good diet, good exercise, good living is important and necessary. It's an interesting article by John McPartland several years ago, The Care and Feeding of the Endocannabinoid System. It talks about getting enough of these omega-3 and omega-6 oils because they are precursors to the natural cannabinoids. If you're not really getting them, you're not taking care of your nutritional needs. So that is an important part of it as well.
You've been working with people living with dementia at assisted living facilities in Northern California for a few years now. Tell us the story of how it all began.
Well, my association with a local psychiatrist, Dr. Phil Grobe, he and I became friends through some through other friends. And when I understood he was a psychiatrist and he was cannabis friendly, we began an association that has really brought us to be pretty good friends over these years. Well, he was getting calls at a residential care facility for the elderly in Santa Rosa for dementia. And I was also being asked to see some of these patients and evaluate them and give some ideas as to how we might approach them as far as treatment. Dr. Grobe, as much as he's cannabis friendly, at the time didn't have as much experience in choosing different chemovars, what might be best. So we collaborated and we were able to share information about, let's try this, let's try that. And in doing this, we connected with the owners and the managers of this facility and the nursing staff, and probably most importantly, the nursing staff was really favoring the idea of using cannabis medicine because, among other things, they had lost people who died unexpectedly using antipsychotics and other potent medicines, benzodiazepines, antidepressants, and so forth. So as they lost people, it was really heartbreaking to the staff, to the owners of the facility, and to the caregivers and families that this person probably died on account of the pharmaceuticals that he or she was taking rather than anything else. It was, granted, people with dementia are in the latter years of their life, but there are known adverse effects for these drugs. That's why they're often referred to as black box warning drugs. So with that set up, the owners of the facility said, please come in and help us with this. We really would like to avoid these complications, horrible side effects of chemicals that are being used, especially in the context of the fact that they don't work very well, and the patients really need to have some other alternative. So we began to intervene by saying, okay, let's try 5 milligrams of THC or 10 milligrams of THC, or let's blend it with THC and CBD. And we began to kind of work toward medicines that seemed to work best. That worked well in getting underway, and then there was turnover of staff, new nurses came in, but the program remained. And as the patients would present with agitated behaviors, psychiatric problems of significance, the families were asking for medications. They were asking the psychiatrist to intervene and see if we could help. And it turned out that the cannabis was really working better than anything else. Not unexpected for Dr. Grobe and me. And it did allow us to be able to diminish or discontinue the use of conventional pharmaceuticals, which was a big deal, and everybody took notice. About that time, 2015, there were a few papers that came out saying, you know, here's a protocol we might look at for how we would treat people with cannabis. Didn't really talk about, well, there were a couple studies, but they were using trivial amounts of cannabinoids and typically synthetic single molecules, which don't behave the same as cannabis does. So we began to take some lessons from this experience, and we just stayed firm on the fact that we needed whole plant medicine. It works better. And increase the dose until we find an effective dose. So this really was about individual treatment plans. So someone may get by with 5 milligrams of each, THC and CBD, and have an effective dose. But we saw other people, we just had to keep marching up on the dose until we got up as much as 30 milligrams of each, THC and CBD, a 6-fold difference in a dose. Which, if you're running a randomized controlled trial, you don't tailor the treatment plans for each patient. You have a fixed dose, and if you're looking at a fixed dose, particularly a fixed dose of a single synthetic cannabinoid, you may not find the therapeutic benefits. And that's what we actually saw in the initial studies. There was one study that was in Boston in 1997, and they wanted to look at how well it could help appetite, because we were talking about the AIDS epidemic, people using cannabis to help with appetite and weight loss. And they did find that those that were on the synthetic cannabinoid did have weight gain. But they remarked that the more important finding was that the behaviors of these people changed so much. And again, that supported my understanding of what I was seeing cannabis do for elderly people. But it gave more of a stronghold for our approach to patients, recognizing that, yeah, it can do a lot of things for these patients. But controlling aggressive and agitated behavior is probably number one. It makes life so much different for everybody concerned.
So you haven't found any particular, most people respond to 20 milligrams of 1-to-1 3 times a day.
You know, I can say what we found, and that is, we know that the majority of patients are going to do fine with 10 milligrams of THC, 10 milligrams of CBD per dose. But the head nurse says, we know when we start them on this, they're going to be somnolent for a few days. They may sleep it off for a bit. And then what we find is that they become tolerant to the THC, and then within a few days they're up and active, and really with quite different behavior than they had prior. They're much less agitated. The behaviors are quite different. They participate in group home projects, playing games, watching movies, crossing to the game hall across the road. This is it's a little section of a community with streets and houses going different directions. And they're all part of the facility. So maybe the movie's over at this facility at 1 in the afternoon. So they have lunch, they come to the movie, and so forth. So we're finding that these patients these clients are much happier and do much better when they've gotten tolerant of this dose of medicine. Now, if I'm doing this with somebody in my office, I might say, okay, let's just start with 1 milligram of each. You're not going to feel this. I just want you to get comfortable and confident in using this. And then in a few days or next week, we can double the dose to 2 milligrams of each. And then we may go to 3 and 4 and 5. And over the course of a month or even more, we'll adjust the dose to find what works. And they develop the tolerance much more slowly, which is gentle, and it's a nice way to do it. It's much easier for the staff, as you can imagine, to not be changing the dose every day. Just, okay, that's the standard dose, take the dose, 7 a.m. or 8 a.m., again at 2 or 3 p.m., and maybe a bedtime dose in the evening. And if they can standardize it, it makes it much easier for everybody. Because of the way that we've designed our healthcare system and required randomized controlled trials as a way to determine whether or not a chemical, a drug, meets standards in terms of efficacy and safety. Does it work? Is it safe to use? These questions have plagued cannabis research because basically the government hasn't allowed randomized controlled trials to come to the cannabis world. There are very few. There are some studies out there, but they're very few. And that is really where we need to go head-to-head between cannabis products as well as between cannabis and any pharmaceutical product to show how well this does in fact work. How do we dose this? What's the methods of administration? And what's the ratio of cannabinoids? What's the dosing that we're going to aim for? What's the frequency of dosing? And that we have to adjust depending on some of those things that we can't control. Metabolism, for one. The rate of metabolism of cannabinoids is a bit different from person to person. So those that are fast metabolizers may need 2 or 3 or 4 doses in a day. A person who's a slow metabolizer may get by with a dose per day. So we really have to tailor the treatment plan based on that individual. And it's remarkable how different it is from person to person. So this is something you learn as a clinician, something that you have to teach to the primary care practitioners or the nursing staff to recognize we're not getting control, even though the dose is already at such and such. We don't have enough medicine on board to meet the needs of this patient. The research papers that have come out talking about protocols reinforce this same idea, that the dementia patients are a good place to start. Totally makes sense. I mean, even if there were cognitive problems in a patient population of moderately demented patients, totally makes sense to use it anyway if it's going to help many other aspects of their care.
The United States Department of Health holds patent number 6630507B1 on cannabis for stroke treatment and to protect against neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's. How is it that the U.S. government can simultaneously hold a patent on this powerful medicine and also say it has no medical efficacy, placing it on the Schedule I of drugs with heroin, bath salts, spice, and K2?
It is illogical. Health and Human Services holds the patent for cannabinoids for inflammation and for neuroprotection. They don't specify which cannabinoids, and the government's focus has been to vilify THC. It's been a little lax around the CBD, as you know, because CBD is everywhere, and the government can't control it, even though technically DEA might still say it's illegal, but it's ubiquitous. It's everywhere now. And people are using it, and in many cases to good benefit. So there's a gray area there about CBD. But for THC, it remains the target of the federal researchers to imply that THC has a laundry list of harms. And so the research goes to looking for harms. And if you're paying people to look for harm, you're going to write it into your abstract or write it into your conclusions that we need to be very careful. We need more research. We don't really understand this. There is some evidence that people have some cognitive issues when they're under the influence of cannabis. Well, that's a therapeutic use of cannabis. It's not a harm. It's just one of those things that goes along with a medication that has those roles in our physiology. It slows down neurotransmission, protects the nervous system in a variety of ways.
We have a friend living with dementia who doesn't have much agitation, and she was wondering if CBD would work for her. Could an isolate work for her? She's afraid of getting high. Does THC really need to be part of this protocol?
Mm-hmm. It's a good question, a common question these days. And I can't tell you how many people I have that come to me saying, we want the CBD. You know, it's like they've been hearing the media, they've been understanding that maybe CBD is the medicine of cannabis, not really recognizing the rest of the story. And if the government's out there vilifying it for, you know, prenatal use, for neonates and young adults and adolescents using cannabis, and harm to the developing brain, and gateway drug into schizophrenia and other psychiatric disorders, and on and on and on. We can look at any of those papers and dismantle them and say this study was not really controlled. When we controlled for alcohol, there's no evidence of any harm, and so forth. But this is part of the territory that we're having to negotiate. Is the public thinks that THC is dangerous in many cases. So a lot of my role is to explain we can try CBD as a dominant molecule. In medical marijuana grown for CBD, the high CBD strains, I let them know right off that it may be 20 to 1 CBD to THC. It might be 30 to 1. It might be 18 to 1, depending on the product line. But it's predominantly CBD, but it's a whole spectrum of molecules, and it works better with that whole spectrum of molecules. And don't be shopping on the internet for pure CBD. It's not really what you want. So there's a learning curve in having the families of demented patients or the families treating loved ones with cannabis to understand that THC is a player. You use as much as you can tolerate, and people get tolerant of, in many cases, very large doses of THC without any problem. Mm-hmm. You just have to typically go more slowly, or in the case of the nursing home, just fix the dose, deliver it. If you find after a week you're still too somnolent, then you might lighten up and go with half the dose. Mm-hmm. But otherwise, 10 and 10 seems to work well in this population.
How long before most people living in U.S. care facilities can benefit from cannabis medicine?
Well, we do have a difference between the RCFE, the residential care facility for the elderly, and a nursing facility. There's different regulatory bodies in California. It's much more rigid within the nursing home facility, where drugs are dispensed by nurses or nurses' aides perhaps at a specific prescribed dose. And when we're dealing with RCFEs, we're not really dispensing per se. It's technically you are assisting the elderly in their own care. So we're taking their medicine to them to assist them in taking it. So those facilities don't have nearly the oversight. So it's easy enough for any RCFE in the state of California, probably nationally, to be able to administer the cannabis medicine and get underway today. Okay. That's possible. Okay. But within the nursing home facilities, now we're dealing with other regulatory agencies and have to show proof of consistency in the medicine and so forth. So I think it's coming. It's just that there are more hurdles to overcome in bringing it to nursing home facilities.
How do we help our elected representatives understand that we must do something different before the Alzheimer's tsunami happens? That we must be allowed to research and in some cases use Schedule I drugs?
Some of it is reducing it to monetary terms. The cost of maintaining people in nursing facilities who are moderately to severely demented is very costly. And when we see that people can stay at home longer and they're happier, or perhaps their disease does not progress in the same way, it's going to make economic sense to use cannabis. So I think there is a place where we need to show the economics of this medicine. It makes it sensible. I do want to point out, though, that CBD, even the dominant whole plant CBD medicines, you mentioned Israel and their efforts, and particularly interesting is their efforts in treating in treating autistic kids. Mm-hmm. And you know that the results have shown that one strain of CBD, high CBD cannabis, worked nicely to reduce the agitation, anxiety, the isolation, some of the learning problems that autistic kids were experiencing. And it worked very well. And then when they switched to another high CBD strain, almost identical in low THC, high CBD, it didn't work. And so this is a very important point in a cannabis specialist learning, to understand that even though the CBD is virtually identical between two strains of CBD-rich medicine, they're not going to work. One may not work as well as the other. So what they were doing in this population was treating with 100 milligrams about 3 times a day. That's a pretty good sized dose of CBD. In California, if you were to treat 100 milligrams TID 3 times a day, a common bottle of 1 ounce of tincture might cost $70 to $100 for an ounce of medicine. That is probably at a minimum 300 milligrams in the bottle. Mm-hmm. It could contain more, but it's been standardized to no more than 10 milligrams per dropperful when we first regulated this industry a year and a half ago. So now the point is, we have a situation where we can't afford $80 a day to treat somebody with 100 milligrams of CBD 3 times a day. Mm-hmm. It's way out of line. Mm-hmm. So even though it's a weed and it's cheap and it's easy to grow, most people aren't going to be able to afford that kind of medicine. Mm-hmm. It's just too expensive. Bringing in THC actually is quite a benefit, because you can drop the dosing way back down, because THC is a more potent molecule. And so now we're down at the 5 milligrams of each or 10 milligrams of each, as opposed to 100 milligrams at a dose. So it's much more cost effective when we're using some THC, and more effective when using THC.
Because it seems to make the CBD work better.
It does. Yeah, they do work better together.
You were saying in the Israeli autism study, the 2 different strains that were both CBD dominant with the same ratio of CBD to THC were actually totally different in effect. What else is in the plant that would make the 2 so different?
Well, it was at this lab that Daddy Meary pointed out about probably 2 years ago, that these strains have a vast number of minor cannabinoids. We went from saying, there are about 70 cannabinoids in cannabis. He came out and said, well, there are actually 100 to 144 cannabinoids in cannabis. Many of them don't have names yet. They just have a number that his lab has assigned to them as they come off of the gas chromatograph. So he has brought us a long way in understanding that, okay, THC and CBD may be the same, but what are the differences in the minor cannabinoids? And in 32 cannabinoids he looked at in one analysis between the strain that worked for autism and the strain that didn't work for autism, it happened to be the varin molecules that were the most different. So that may be a clue to why one strain worked and why it didn't. It's a guess. But if you look at the varins, you will recognize perhaps the name THCV. That's tetrahydrocannabinol varin. And the varin molecules are different. Instead of having a 5-carbon side chain at the end of the THC molecule or the CBD molecule, you have a 3-carbon molecule or a 3-carbon side chain. Basically, it's like putting the key in the socket, and because the key is shorter, it doesn't activate the receptor. So THCV actually has a mild blocking effect in the receptor. It's mild, though, and a big dose of THCV activates the receptor, and a small dose doesn't. It seems to block the receptor. So this may be a clue as to looking at those molecules, and when they are present, we may have a medicine that works. But again, we would need a clinical trial to really reinforce this theory as to what's the difference. That the minor cannabinoids are very important. And we're not only seeing it in mood disorders where agitated behaviors improve with one strain but not with another, but we're also seeing it in terms of managing cancer. And this has become a fairly big part of my practice in the last few years, is cancer care. Probably 30 or 35% of my patient load is cancers now, or patients with cancer. And again, some of these minor cannabinoids really play a significant role. And we may have strains that we'll be able to direct people to here in the near future. We've kind of changed from calling them strains to calling them cultivars to calling them chemovars. So we're looking at the chemical makeup of these molecules, of these plants, so that we can really optimize the treatment. And if you look again at Miri's work in the Technion Cannabis Laboratory, they're showing that one strain of THC-rich cannabis or CBD-rich cannabis may do very well at stopping the growth of a breast cancer or a colon cancer, but doesn't do much at all for prostate cancer. Whereas another strain of a CBD-rich cannabis might not do so well for the colon and the breast cancer, but do very well on the prostate cancer. So it's the minor cannabinoids that are playing this role is likely. So we're trying to bring this research along, preclinical research, to where we can direct people to the right chemovar for their cancer. So that will come. We can really personalize care and take something like a biopsy specimen, culture it, test it against a bunch of different chemovars, and be able to direct the patient to say, well, Chela over in this address and phone number has the strain you're looking for, and can provide that to you at a reasonable cost, and that may be your best cannabis medicine for this particular problem. Yeah. Individual care will come along, individualizing the care. So that's an exciting part. And I think we have to look at our individual genetics as a cofactor there as well. So not only choosing the best strain, but recognizing that our endocannabinoid systems aren't the same. And when we look at the genes that make these receptors, we get clusterings of different conditions. So people with a mood disorder might have a same receptor, and somebody with an autoimmune disease might have the same receptor. Somebody with a neurodegenerative disease may have the same receptor. They're not the same from condition to condition or person to person. So by, again, recognizing these differences, we're going to be able to help people fortify their cannabinoid tone and maybe, more than likely, optimize their health care by individualizing their cannabis medicine.
And the only way to clinical trials really is to take cannabis off the Schedule I, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. That would be much more sensible. Then we could do all these tests. We could start them tomorrow.
Back in the day, Eli Lilly had one of the largest cannabis cultivation fields. Do you think it's possible to talk Eli Lilly into starting up again?
I would hope so. It's about market share.
Yeah.
And about 10 years ago, I had a little brief interview at a cannabis conference, and I said the swing in the pharmaceutical industry's bottom line, if cannabis were legalized, would be scores of billions of dollars, probably annually. Some of these big drugs are bringing in $1 billion a year. And so if we're looking at a lot of different medicines that could be replaced with cannabis, I think the pharmaceutical industry just doesn't want to tangle with cannabis. They want to keep it illegal because they're selling drugs for sleep, for pain, for anxiety, for depression, for, you know, the laundry list. They have a drug for everything except for agitation and aggressive behaviors. So I'm a little pessimistic, honestly, that we can get through with local California changes. I think it's a good sign to change California or any state's Controlled Substances Act to remove cannabis from Schedule I. I think it's a sign that the feds need to come around. But whether it actually makes a difference in research, the strings are there. The universities are very wary of this. We can't aid and abet in the patients getting their cannabis.
Okay.
We can have the discussion, we can write a recommendation, but as far as pulling something out of the drawer and say, okay, here's what you want,
Right.
we can't do that. No, we can send them to a dispensary with advice on what to find.
Sure.
But the docs have been really sidelined. We are more restricted than anybody in the world. The docs are. Technically, we can't even write it out as a treatment plan because that looks too much like a prescription.
One more question. Other drugs on the Schedule I. Psilocybin, the active ingredient in magic mushrooms, was already decriminalized in Denver and Oakland. It's about to be on the ballot in other states, and it's being fast-tracked at the FDA as a treatment for depression. It seems to me that the Schedule I of drugs might hold some secrets that we need the answers to. Do you think that the Schedule I of drugs should just be thrown out the window entirely so we can explore solutions to these tricky brain disorders?
I really agree with that, and I believe that the federal government should not be involved in banning plants from anybody. I think what the federal government could be focusing on is being sure that we get an education and understand that these plants may be dangerous. These plants could kill you. These plants may be psychoactive. These plants are used in conjunction with psychotherapy and may be very effective in some patients with mental disorders and so forth. I think education is an important role for the government to take part in. But to be banning plants, I don't think that's the role of our government at all. I think we should have full range of the plants and learn what they can do, and then with guided therapies, help people to achieve their best health.
So Dr. Hergenrather says that many patients he's worked with respond well to a 1-to-1 ratio of CBD to THC, and in a facility setting, they've been starting with 10 milligrams.
Yeah, but within a home setting, he said you can work up to your own therapeutic dose more slowly. In a facility, you want to see medicine work quickly. And while a higher dose may cause some sleepiness at first, most people get used to it within a few days.
Of course, everyone is different, but I wish we had this information when my mom was first diagnosed.
Yeah, it is so important to have a knowledgeable guide. We thank Dr. Hergenrather for all of his pioneering work and for sitting down with us to talk about how cannabis helps dementia.
You can reach him at drjeffhergenrather.com or find a practitioner in your area at the Society of Cannabis Clinicians website, cannabisclinicians.org.
Thanks for joining us for Cannabis Helps Dementia. Be sure to download and like us on iTunes.
And please share this podcast with anyone you know in relationship with dementia.
So go download other episodes of Cannabis Helps Dementia and be sure to like and share on your favorite podcasting network.
Subscribe to hear new episodes of Cannabis Helps Dementia, including one with Dr. Hergenrather's colleague, Dr. Philip Grobe.
and a conversation with the founder and head nurse of the premier dementia care assisted living facility in Northern California that's been using cannabis medicine for over 15 years.
Oh, and don't miss the episode with Gary Beal as we chat with and about how his wife Becky has been helped with cannabis medicine while living with frontotemporal dementia.
Do you want to tell your story of how cannabis helps dementia? Drop us a note or connect with us on the socials.
Check out the Society of Cannabis Clinicians website and find real medical professionals familiar with cannabis medicine in your area, like Dr. Hergenrather.
Because remember, we're not doctors, just family caregivers turned advocates.
And don't forget, download, like, and share what you learned. Cannabis helps dementia.
Nice work.
Yeah.
Nice work there, Fiorini.
Thanks, babe. Thank you for putting all that together. That was freaking fantastic. It was some, yeah, thank you.
So that was episode 3.
Yeah.
And all 3 of those episodes are available right now on iTunes.
Let me shut off the fan.
Oh, yes, the AC. Where you can rate and review and try to help get us a buzz going over there on the iTunes. But you can also listen to it on Spotify and a bunch of other 7 other platforms that I have never heard of before.
Well, we're new to this whole podcast situation.
Yes, but I'll tell you what, we're new to Anchor FM, and it's pretty
really
foolproof
easy and pretty
turnkey
good.
over there. I don't think your dad even wants to try to start one.
I know,
on
it's pretty exciting.
Anchor. It's going to be hilarious.
I would love to share a comment from Cindy Timko
Oh
Lott.
yes, please do.
From Facebook. So, Cindy, thank you so much for finding us here today. She wrote a few comments, and I'd like to read them all because she, too, has had a similar experience.
Awesome.
She writes,
Well,
I had a medical card for my mother, and it worked wonderful. Her to switch to THC, and we used Lazarus oil CBD to start with. Mom, and it worked great. She could sit and watch TV and focus better. She continues, my mother stopped wandering because of cannabis. I kept her home to the end so she could use it. Cindy, you are a rock star. Thank you for doing that for your mama. And she continues, I wish I would have heard this early on. I found I was on my own adjusting my mother's medication. It worked well, but I had to figure it out how to adjust it as they prescribed it for pain for replacement hips for dementia, not for dementia, and nobody understood what helped and what didn't. I could only figure it out by being with her 24/7 and adjusting it with what I could get from the dispensary. Some work so much better than others, and it's hard to have a constant to get those products. Yeah, well, what they get changes or is hard to get in some blends. Totally. Teepa Snow, I don't know if you saw the Teepa video, but Teepa Snow was talking about that also, that we got to have standardized dosing and being able to get it consistently, because once you find Jilly Love on YouTube was calling it a dementiavar, which I think is awesome because they're called cultivars, or they used to be called strains. And it would be awesome to find a dementiavar that includes all the stuff that the doctors, Dr. Russo and Dr. Hergenrather, were talking about today. So CBD and THC in the materials, as well as alpha-pinene for memory and linalool to chill people out. So it would be awesome to find a naturally growing plant like that.
well, you might have to find a botanist to make it for you.
Of course, but that's why
possible.
I'm talking about it now, because I know that a lot of growers watch this show and are around.
And
so
you could,
never know.
and of course, there's the moleculists that could, and even if full spectrum, you can pull apart all those 144 cannabinoids. If you can identify them, you can pull them all apart and then mix it together back into something with natural products. But of course, the plant with those properties would be the best. But even in a plant that has the right profile, it's going to vary a lot in the plant, depend even on the plant itself because of the top, what's the, what you're going to get the most sun on the top and blah, blah, blah.
Yes, except they figured it out in Sativex and Epidiolex, how to standardize it with using real plants.
Yeah.
So we know it's possible.
Yeah, well, the molecules have to be pulled out, sure.
Yeah, well, no. Sativex is the whole thing. It's a whole plant, isn't it?
Maybe look into that. It's exactly if it's actually a strain that's grown. I don't know if it's actually a strain that's grown.
Yeah, I think obviously we need more studies, yo. But I have found.
Should ask Dr. Russo that next time because he was there for that.
Right. In my experience with people living with dementia, a one-to-one, naturally occurring one-to-one in Harlequin tsunami seems to be a decent place to start. You can obviously, go dial things up or down as needed. Like I'm finding that one of my friends who's living with dementia, who was doing awesome on a 1-to-1, 10 milligrams CBD to THC. As soon as I heard that from Dr. Hergenrather, I talked to my friend about it and her family, and they said, let's give it a try. And we tried it, and she's been on it for a year, and it's been great until the pandemic. And now she is a nervous wreck all the time. And so I changed her to a more CBD dominant cultivar. So I don't know what it's called. It doesn't have a name. Only has a number. So it's a 5-to-2.
5-to-2.
5-to-2
That's
CBD
and that's a custom cultivar too. That's a cultivar that was grown.
Yeah.
For that level.
Right.
Specifically for
but
that.
But still, that particular cultivar, I wish that cultivar were everything and then some, but that's not doing the trick either. It's tricky because we're the ones doing this research. Family caregivers are the ones doing this research. So it's important to write things down and keep track of stuff and to share in community what you're doing so that other people who are searching around like Cindy did can find other people who are searching around, and we can learn from each other. Because like Teepa said in episode 2, it takes 25 years for new methods in medicine to become part of the mainstream. And millions of people around the world, almost 50 million people around the world living with dementia, don't have time to wait for that shit. And neither do the people who love them. We want people to feel better right now today, because when a person living with dementia is not doing well and is highly agitated, nobody rests. Nobody has peace. So it's important that for those people living with dementia and the 3 times as many unpaid family caregivers and, frankly, friend caregivers, that we find something that works. Because right now there's no effective treatment for Alzheimer's disease. Even the Alzheimer's Association says so.
That's right.
But they're afraid of cannabis.
Terrified. It's crazy. All great information, and it will continue. Thank you. And that's it. And we've already have our first response of someone who cannabis is helping them and has helped them.
Awesome.
With a family member.
So good.
And that's why we're doing this podcast and this show. And to answer the question, Vegan Metro said, will you be doing this show regularly? And I say, yes, we will. Whenever we drop a podcast on Fridays, we'll do a show about it on, we'll just include that in our show on Sundays, along with a little news blurb.
I'd love to finish up. Cindy added,
yes.
Yes, often the dispensary advises all wrong. They just give info they've been told, not what they see and experience. So the mix would be wrong if you only went with their advice. They mean well, but they have never seen it firsthand. Exactly. We're trying to create more education like this for dispensaries, for assisted living facilities, and that's why we got the podcast out. Hey, I just want to say hi to Kathy Jane Quinn. Thank you so much for joining. It's really nice to see you here. And also to Rose C. LaChance. Rose is awesome. She has been a dementia caregiver for 24 years in California and is completely on board with cannabis medicine for people living with dementia. So I thank you, ladies, for joining us on Facebook. Thank you so much.
And we are restreaming on all of the platforms we can to get this important message out that Cannabis Helps Dementia, and the new podcast available on iTunes, on Anchor FM, on Spotify, on a bunch of other services, but those are the main buggers. And iTunes, we're trying to get everybody to go over there and rate and review us over on iTunes.
That would be awesome.
And that'd be great because we've got 3 episodes up, the first 3 episodes, and maybe we can get on the new and noteworthy for iTunes, and then that would give us a real big bump to get this information out. So share there, and you can also, if you have a message like that, I'm sorry, was it Nancy?
No, that's Cindy.
Cindy, I'm sorry, Cindy. That Cindy shared and her experience. If you
Cindy should call.
Absolutely, Cindy, you could call and
awesome.
Leave a message for us over on Anchor FM /Cannabis Helps Dementia. You can leave a message if you're so inclined, and we'll include it on the podcast.
You'd be our first one.
You'd be our first story of a caregiver that he finds it useful. Other than us.
But we don't count, apparently.
We know more now because we've turned other caregivers locally onto it.
Absolutely.
So we know more caregivers now. So you can leave a message for us on Anchor FM and support us there if you want to. But leave the message. We'll include it in the podcast. And share. Get us buzzing on iTunes if you can. And over on Spotify, too. They don't happily have a rating system over on Spotify that I see. But I think you can only do it on the iTunes. So if you can do that there, that'd be great. But however you share it, you can share this YouTube video because we'll put the links to everything in the description where people can go and share and help do that. And we'll include our new podcast in the show on Sundays. It's a 3-hour show anyway.
God.
instead of news, well, we're not going to do news programs from around.
No, we can't do that because we can't do that.
Hey, look, we just got monetized. So I don't want to screw that up. But we'll talk about cannabis in the news. We just won't do TV news.
Right.
And
talk about articles. Maybe even an article about this podcast.
What? There's a rumor. Yes,
Keep your eyes peeled.
We did shoot it to some notables in the media.
Yeah. We'll see what happens.
And a lot of conversation in the chat about mushrooms, and of course that is plant medicine. And Dr. Hergenrather, of course, mentioned that at the end of we talked about Schedule 1 and other things that should be looked at. And it's interesting. There's a lot. There seems to be even more interest in psychedelic mushrooms and even other psychedelics in psychiatry and investment right now than in cannabis was early on. Dr. Bronner is put a bunch of money into psychedelic research. And not just the psychedelic kind, of course, that are catching on. It's all of the mushrooms, the medicinal, healthy mushrooms that are catching on. This article in Rob Report, thanks to one of my followers and somebody I follow over on Twitter. Forget his name. I'm sorry.
I just want to say thank you while you're looking for that to Cannabis Sativa. Thank you so much for rating and reviewing us on iTunes.
Thank you, Dan.
Cannabis Sativa also has a really terrific podcast.
Yes.
And he covers all news. He's Mr. News. He knows everything about the legislation and things going through the Congress, and I just can't deal with it right now. I thank him
contributes
so much.
regularly, like every day.
Yeah, he's
every
amazing.
Day he has
so
amazing
do
information.
follow Cannabis Sativa. If you're interested in cannabis news, he's amazing.
Agreed. And activism and just benefit and helping people get their marijuana cards.
Yeah,
and
how things are done.
It's an all service podcast.
He's great.
Cannabis.
Really great.
Dan is Cannabis Sativa.
True story. I want to say one more thing quick before you move on.
Yes.
Julie Love asks, I wonder if lifelong users have less dementia. So, my mom used cannabis medicine my whole life. So she was a long-time cannabis user, but she did not use cannabis like I use cannabis.
And she smoked her
And she
life,
smoked
too.
cigarettes from 14 to 55.
Yeah.
Like 3 packs a day, cigarettes. And at night, she would have like 2 hits because she told me as a child that it opened the duct in her gallbladder and it helped ease her gallstone pain. She had gallstones my whole life. Eventually, when she died, she had a completely porcelainized gallbladder. It was totally solid.
We have it in a jar.
Yeah. No, we do not. Anyway, so I think you need a certain amount if you're going to count on cannabis to be your preventive. But reading Dr. Dale Bredesen's book, The End of Alzheimer's, as well as 15 other books about Alzheimer's and dementia, Alzheimer's is so complex, and dementia is so complex. There are more than 100 types of dementia. They can happen so many different ways. They can come from strokes, from alcohol, from, just a million different things that go wrong. Not a million, 100 and some odd, because there's 100 and some odd dementias. So Parkinson's can become dementia. So, there's lots of things that become dementia. Dr. Dale Bredesen's book addresses Alzheimer's specifically, and he has identified 36 contributing factors to whether you get Alzheimer's or not. So he likens it to holes in your roof. So if there are 36 holes in the roof, you can't just plug one or two and expect to have a dry house when it rains. So I think that life and health is complex, and I think that we need to do all the things in order to preserve our brain. At least I do, because apparently everyone in my family has dementia.
Teflon. Did she use Teflon, didn't she? No.
She did use Teflon,
She used Teflon
for a time,
yeah.
For quite a long time. She believed in nonstick because she believed in low oil, because low oil contributes to other things that are, beneficial, like a healthy body weight, blah, blah. Oil from the jar. Life is complex. She did not cook in aluminum because her grandmother had Alzheimer's disease. So she believed not using aluminum. It's complex. There are 36 contributing factors: diet, exercise, lifestyle. I wouldn't rely on cannabis alone. However, once you have dementia, cannabis really helps the behavioral symptoms associated with a dementing brain. So
and it's certainly well worth the while to supplement your endocannabinoid system, particularly if you're not doing it with other things like exercise, eating green leafy vegetables or whatever you're supposed to eat.
Yes, green leafy vegetables, exercise.
I'm not supposed to eat green leafy vegetables.
Right. Acupuncture, chiropractic, all benefit the endocannabinoid system, all increase endocannabinoid tone. And
and oil and heating oil is bad all the time.
Very bad for every system.
Which makes you wonder.
So there's lots of
vaping
stuff.
Oil, but
Lots of stuff. So just try to do your best. Don't stress out about it though.
Stress.
That's
like
either.
a number one too. That's on the list. Top of the one of the things that's top of the list. And cannabis helps with stress.
Yeah.
Also, it's that's a good reason to. That's obviously cannabis sales went up like crazy before COVID because they thought they were going to shut it all down, and then it became essential, and the sales are continuing to rise with the delivery and curbside pickup, and cannabis is essential, and we should get your friend on the show to talk about that, how she was influential in getting that done here in California.
Oh yeah. I don't know. She doesn't like tooting her own horn much.
Yeah, I know. That's why I didn't say her name.
I appreciate it.
But yes, and fantastic fungi. We haven't fungi. We haven't had a chance to watch that yet, but that is certainly on our list.
Totally.
And we should probably watch that tonight, maybe.
Yeah, that'd be great.
After Westworld, and Dolores. Never mind.
No,
Evan
that's
Rachel
a different
Wood.
show.
Evan Rachel Wood is my girl right now.
That's a different show. Yes, you're a girl in the media.
Sometimes we believe things because we want them to. We want to.
Yeah, we want them to be true.
We want them to be true.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
But anyway, I digress.
Oh.
I digress. We have been celebrating the new podcast, Cannabis Helps Dementia. Do us a favor. Go over to iTunes, rate and review us. Find us on your favorite iTunes podcast server. If we're not on your favorite podcast server, let us know what it is, and we will submit it so that it goes up there. I've done that already on something that's not going through Anchor. I just submitted it through another server. So because somebody said, "Hey, are you on this?" And I said, "No, I'm not. I will go." So yes, please do that for us. That would be awesome. And do that for the people who need this information. So we thank you so much for joining us. Just addressing some stuff in the chat. Planet of Humans. I liked it. Hi,
Paul Baker.
I have been so over all of these green organizations for a long time. And I think Josh Fox is a tool. I said it here.
I think that everyone has nobody's all good, nobody's all bad.
You should definitely watch Planet of the Humans. Chela has not seen it yet.
Yes, I did.
Did you watch?
Yes.
You did not watch Planet of the Humans.
Yeah, how they chipper the trees.
You watched that whole movie with me?
I was here.
I don't think you watched the whole thing. I showed you part of it.
You know what, dude? I just can't. I can't.
I
know it's all a fazool.
And then I watched another TED Talk from last year about solar, and it's we're whistling past the graveyard, people.
Reduce, reuse, then recycle.
And we didn't have any kids.
We got to do those things.
So you're welcome.
We reduced. We reduced.
You're welcome.
We're reusing, and we're teaching folks about the benefits of medical cannabis for
that's right.
Dementia.
And we have to go down and get our curbside pickup of essential vegan donuts.
What?
That's right. No. We do. It's on my list tonight.
Oh, boy.
I said that, didn't I? I said we're going for vegan donuts.
I didn't recall hearing that.
She says, I don't listen to her. Holy cannabis oil. Holy cannabis oil is here.
Holy in the YouTube. Well,
just
guys.
In time.
Thank you all so much for joining us.
Now you cut my news off.
What?
And now you cut my news off with comments, and now you're eliminating my news altogether.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Do your
I was
news.
talking about a mushroom story.
Oh, sorry.
And you said, while you're looking for that, I'm just going to talk about this.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Why don't you single you so I can be off camera at least? I need a break. It's been a while. We've been stuck together for 8 weeks.
She had to vent. She has to vent. She has to speak to some other human beings other than me.
Me?
Chela's been doing great caring work for someone else who is suffering, who is a person living with dementia, in this time. So it's she's doing amazing work, and she does now. You should come and look. And before we sign off, you'll give a full look at your new "I am not a doctor" outfit.
This is just to so my friend Carolyn, are you on a single? You are. Let me come over to your camera.
Oh, okay. Well, you're on a single now, but I'll put you on a single.
So I'm gonna walk up so people can see my whole outfit.
Oh, okay. Well, let me get out of there, and I'll move my microphone.
So here's my whole outfit. It's a tunic. I love my new shoes.
Chela is wearing a white tunic.
Yeah, by J. Jill.
By J. Jill for
on sale for $20.
For $20.
Mm-hmm. And Skechers shoes.
Skechers shoes.
They're leopard.
And show us. Come close and show us your.
This is the silly part of the show, by the way.
Your doctor pin.
Oh.
Cannabis doctor pin. No, up more. There you go. There you go. That's great. Love that. That just happenstance.
We're not doctors.
We're not doctors, but we pretend to be on YouTube.
But listen, the fact is that a lot of older people and people living with dementia only will talk to authority figures and will only speak to people in authority. So you got to level up. And if that means you got to wear a suit or you got to wear a white shirt, then that's what it means.
The aloha shirt doesn't count?
You're a white man. They're going to listen to you.
They're going to listen to me. I'm a little white man with white hair. They're going to listen to me anyway.
They're totally going to listen to you.
It's true.
Right? But they're not going to listen to me.
It's unfortunate, but it's true.
So, anyway, thank you, Vegan Metro. I appreciate you.
And I have enough information to be dangerous. So that's what's really...
Oh, hey, wait a minute.
Yes.
Back to the seriousness.
What?
We have a new friend in the YouTube chat, J&K Triple G.
Oh, welcome.
My grandpa has early signs. He has Parkinson's. Well, since you just joined, I highly recommend rewinding or going better.
Go to the podcast.
Go to Apple Podcast and listen to the episodes because, dude, there's so much you can do to help your grandpa. Even if your grandpa doesn't want to change his diet, you can do a lot with CBD and full spectrum cannabis oil. I'm not a doctor, as you may have heard a minute ago, but I highly recommend listening to the other doctors that we interviewed and checking out what they had to say.
And we'll put the link in the description of the video, but the Frontiers of Integrative Medicine that Dr. Russo wrote in that article, there's a whole section on Parkinson's.
There is.
Disease.
Mm-hmm. Right before the Alzheimer's disease section. So
we will link to that. And it's the Frontier, before we get there, it's the Frontiers in Integrative Medicine.
Integrative Neuroscience.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Integrative Neuroscience, Ethan Russo article on, what's it called? The title? You remember offhand?
Yeah, of course. It's called posted everywhere. Cannabis Therapeutics and the Future of Neurology.
There you go.
Yeah.
Cannabis Therapeutics and the Future of Neurology
Yeah.
is the story. And they cover dosing. I don't know if they do it for Parkinson's, but they do it for Alzheimer's, not dosing, but what types of cannabinoids affect different symptoms. But he covers Parkinson's in that article. And Dr. Russo is in episode 1 of Cannabis Helps Dementia, a brief interview with him. And we're going to get him on for a fuller, a more extended interview soon, very soon. And coming up on Cannabis Helps Dementia, when you subscribe or follow or whatever you do on your favorite podcast server, you will hear from several of the folks that Dr. Hergenrather actually referenced in his interview. We talked to Dr. Philip Grobe, geriatric psychiatrist, and he was mentioned by Dr. Hergenrather and started working with him at a facility. And we have the administrator and the head nurse at that facility to discuss how their use of cannabis for 15 years with many of their patients at this residential care facility for the elderly in Santa Rosa. And we speak with, in fact, one of the family caregivers of a resident of that facility who suffers from frontal temporal dementia. And how cannabis, that story that was referred to by Dr. Hergenrather. We hear that story in an upcoming episode of the podcast.
Yeah.
So you will hear that story of how it miraculously helped someone with frontal temporal dementia for years. So subscribe, rate, review, do what you do on the Apple, iTunes, and iPodcasts. So briefly, before we wrap up the show and head for vegan essential donuts, and whatever else is open down there that we can pick up at the curb. Jeff Siegel, my friend Jeff Siegel, reporter, libertarian, and cannabis fan and writer. He shared this article from Rob Report. Forget CBD. Mushrooms are the beauty and wellness superfood you need right now. A new class of supercharged mushrooms is leading to big benefits. Let me just read a little bit from this. The humble mushroom is the new superfood or super fungus, and it's taking center stage in a number of new topical and ingestible products touted for boosting the immune system, increasing skin's moisture, and even fighting inflammation. But can the simple mushroom live up to all its hype? The experts we spoke with say mushrooms' health and beauty powers are legitimate, but don't pertain to the grocery store variety or the psychedelic drug. Oh, I'd argue that. Instead, the in-demand fungi are a new class of supercharged mushrooms. Quote, they're actually superfoods on steroids because they're adaptogens.
What?
As dermatologist Dennis Gross, founder of the Dennis Gross Skincare line. Adaptogens are herbal pharmaceuticals that do exactly as their name suggests, calibrate their powers to their environment, or, if used in potent enough doses, or beauty and health needs, and combat the physiological effects of stress. Quote, fungi are the ultimate longevity experts, managing to pave their way through 1 billion years of life. From a wellness perspective, they increase the body's immunity and resilience to stress and have the ability to enhance brain functions too. So that's an interesting article. We're actually closer to mushrooms than we are to plants. 50% of our DNA matches with mushrooms. Go figure that out. Also this week, Eureka Alert, CBD shows promise for fighting aggressive brain cancer. Study shows that CBD isolate and extract can slow growth and kill cancer cells.
Which is amazing. I didn't think isolate could do anything.
Are you muted?
Yeah, I'm muted.
Oh, thank you. Oh, thank you very much. Findings from a new study examining human and canine brain cancer cells suggest that cannabidiol could be a useful therapy for a difficult-to-treat brain cancer. Cannabidiol, or CBD, is a non-psychoactive chemical compound derived from marijuana. The study looked at glioblastoma, an often deadly form of brain cancer that grows and spreads very quickly. Even with major advancements in treatment, survival rates for this cancer have not improved significantly. Let's see. Further research and treatment options are urgently needed for patients affected with brain cancer. Our work shows that CBD has the potential to provide an effective synergistic glioblastoma therapy. Geoglastoma. No, it's glioblastoma. It says it right here, it's glioblastoma therapy option, and that it should continue to be vigorously studied. Let me see here what it says. Here it is. Our experiment showed that CBD slows cancer cell growth and is toxic to both canine and human glioblastoma cell lines.
Awesome. Holy shit, that's amazing.
Importantly, the difference in anti-cancer effects between CBD isolate and extract appear to be negligible.
That's really hard to believe.
Unmute if you're coming back.
I did.
Very good.
Really, really hard to believe that
that's
that's negligible. Anyway.
Hey, did you know, Vegan Metro, that a single dose of psilocybin mushrooms can reduce anxiety for nearly 5 years?
What?
That's from a 2016 study.
5 years?
Mm-hmm.
Anxiety? Mm-hmm. You need to send that to your niece.
I'm thinking.
No names.
I'm thinking a little more than 2 grams, probably 3 to 5.
Yeah, I know.
A hero's dose.
It needs to be obviously covered by a doctor, like not babysat.
Trip sitter.
Sat by a psychiatrist. I think she would like that.
Everybody needs a trip sitter.
I know, but
she
she
5
needs
grams.
a psychiatrist.
Yes.
To be her.
I haven't
a
done
doctor.
I haven't done my 5 grams yet because I haven't found my trip sitter.
Yeah.
I need to find the right trip sitter because you need a right trip sitter.
I'm not it.
To do. Chela's not the right trip sitter.
I know me.
Chela will dial 911 in about 30 seconds.
That's not true. I would not dial 911. I would definitely not dial 911. Come on.
You need a trip sitter.
How dare you say I would call 911? Anyway, okay, we're really
But
digressing.
wait.
You got any more news?
Yes.
All right, come
One
on.
doctor. This is an NBC, Chela. We got our friend of the show, and we'll get Dr. Cicely on. We'll get her comments on some symptoms, maybe. One doctor versus the DEA. Inside the battle to study marijuana in America. Millions of people across the U.S. can legally buy pot at dispensaries, but scientists aren't allowed to study it. NBC News. Tyler Kincaid talking about Dr. Sue Sisley and her 7-year attempt to get dirtweed from the University of Mississippi to study. So that's an interesting article in the mainstream. Meanwhile, in the our movie jumps into the news.
Oh, yeah.
Hemp growers report gun battle with invaders who likely thought the plants were pot. Some guy emptied his 59-year-old emptied his clip, 9mm handgun, at people who were, I guess, shooting at him, but they ran away. So yes, hemp is being mistaken for cannabis all over the place. And that's all the news that I found this week that was interesting.
Awesome. And I love how it was germane to our new format.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I appreciate you so much.
You can. I'm still political right now, but I tweet cannabis news over at DC420LA, now called Cannabis Saves the World at DC420LA. Follow the new podcast at Cannabis Helps on Twitter. Do that for us. Let's help us get some more followers over there. And on Instagram, we are at Cannabis Helps Dementia, the full Megillah, which is interesting that it's owned by Facebook, but they will let me put cannabis in the username, but they won't let me do that on Facebook. So it's the CHD podcast. Shh, don't tell anybody. Cannabis Helps Dementia on Facebook. The website, cannabishelpsdementia.com. That's the new website. We'll update things there. You can find all of the podcasts there, actually. We're going to, as they come up, they'll be there. The podcasts will each get our own page eventually, so you'll get all the show notes and links and glossary. There's a glossary right on the front page, so if you heard something in one of the podcasts you don't know about, you can find it maybe over there. But they'll be up there, and you can listen to on your favorite source right from there in our RSS feed, and we'll put other things up there as it happens. And thanks to Anchor FM for distributing and finding us some sponsors. You can make money over on Anchor FM. We've made $1.37 so far.
Hey, we're professionals.
We're professional
We're
podcasters.
professionals.
Because that commercial plays.
Totally. I just want to make a mention about,
Sure.
I love the website. Thank you for building it.
Oh, you're welcome.
I appreciate you. Vegan Metro is talking in the chat about veganism and how it must be talked about when we're talking about a global climate change solution.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm 100% on board with that idea. The very least, we completely need to change how we get our food. If they're going to still eat meat, it needs to be like your local butcher, like your local farm, not these big giant things. I, of course, am with you that everybody should be vegetarian.
Well,
Plant-based.
that's what they're actually recommending now because of the meat shortages that are coming. Is like, oh, get it from your local butcher because you can't get what you can't.
Well,
So-
it should be a more local model, but for all things, for vegetables, fruits, for every food that we grow, it should be local. But yes, I'm with you about the getting rid of. Hey, Dr. Mike.
Yeah, Dr. Mike's
Hi,
in the house.
Techno Biscuit. Awesome, dude.
How's the growing going? Good question,
it.
MDN
Growing?
Niles. Growing? Where?
Hi, Paper Scratcher.
Literally.
Wow, I just looked up and saw all these people. Holy
so-
cannabis oil, I know, you're absolutely right.
So we have no cannabis growing at the moment.
No.
There's about to be vegetables and things growing in all of those planter boxes out in the front of our house. The homeowners have decided to start a victory garden in our front yard, which is awesome because now it looks great again. Though the pile of dirt is gone,
Yeah,
and
it's
the,
much
and the beds
nicer.
are ready to plant. And she's going to be putting vegetables in there, and so it's great.
So it's
And
going to look really great. I love it.
I am going to be starting some microgreens
Mm-hmm.
out on our little back patio, as well as I'm going to be growing some of those medicinal gourmet edible mushrooms.
Like
I'm learning how to grow lion's mane. I haven't found agaricon yet, but I'm going to be growing lion's mane. But I'm going to be growing a lot of edible mushrooms, oyster, and golden oyster, pink oyster, some other stuff. I'm going to be maybe some shiitake. They take longer to grow, but I'm building my mushroom and fruiting chamber. Gourmet mushrooms, of course, edible mushrooms, and that should be starting soon. And cannabis is, I'm afraid, we're just gonna have to, we have a grower friend who has a personal grow, and he shares with us.
That's right.
Plus, we do some curbside pickup at some of our local dispensaries, and we'll get growing again someday, somewhere,
We will.
somewhere, somehow.
We will.
But in the little space that we have, and what's going on, we're going to grow some food. And I eat a lot of mushrooms. I love mushrooms. They're good for me, and so I'm gonna grow some mushrooms for myself.
Yeah.
And
microgreens for me?
and some people on the property, and microgreens for Chela,
Yeah.
and they're gonna be growing vegetables too. So, it's time. It's time for that. It's time we're gonna whatever agriculture we do, whatever we eat, we're gonna have to start eating local, and because obviously our food supply is in danger, counting on big agri businesses that are they used to say, we used to worry in Hawaii about the food supply having 7 to 10 days on the island if the ships ever stopped coming.
Yeah.
They'd run out of food in like a week. And it's interesting to see what's going on with what's going on. So, but that's another show. This is Cannabis Helps Dementia Reefer Revolution crossover. Thank you guys for joining us. We will be back probably next week. We're gonna try to drop an episode on Friday. The new episode with Dr. Grobe, Dr. Philip Grobe, will be next, and we're going to put that out on Friday morning. So wherever you watch, wherever you listen, subscribe. Get ready for that, and rate and review over on iTunes. See if we can get buzzing this week. Maybe get on the new and noteworthy list. That would be quite a coup. But we thank you guys. Thanks for jumping in later. Paper Scratcher, thanks for joining in.
Yes.
Dr. Mike, please rewind. We've got all 3 episodes of the podcast up. That's basically what we did today, was play 3 of our episodes. Or you can just go over to your favorite podcast service and listen to us there, and leave a little comment there or wherever you're at.
Rate and review.
Rate and review on iTunes. But yeah, so our show is going to feature our podcast as well as some news that we'll discuss. And we'll have guests on. We like doing that, and everybody's Zooming now anyway. So we'd love to have Dr. Barry on and Dr. Mike again.
Love to have Dr. Mike.
Listen, there are trials happening. People are looking at cannabis for COVID.
Yep.
It's happening.
Yep.
Israel, it's happening. They're looking at it. We need, and just like it said on that amazing. Oh, I wanted to mention that amazing webinar from Healer that Dr. Mike and Dr. Barry were in the chat and listening and watching.
Did you record that?
And they were. I did not. It's available on YouTube, I think.
Oh, far
I think
out.
it's available on the Healer YouTube.
Oh, great.
And it's really good. So the discussion came up about COVID and cannabis, and of course there's not enough data. There's no trials. There's no studies. There's nothing. There's no information out there. There's no data. But there is data being generated. So we're going to have data. And then the general recommendations: don't smoke, because that's bad anyway.
It damages the villi. But if you're taking cannabis medicine in your drops or oils or some other form, don't stop taking your cannabis medicine. Because it's not going to affect it one way or the other, and it may be beneficial. To quote Donald Trump, what do you got to lose? It's got to be bad news when Trump comes out and says, I hear CBD is good for it. Oh,
then
God.
It'd be like, no,
total
my
face
God,
palm.
my God. Don't let Lev tell him. Lev's going to tell him that it's, look, CBD trials for COVID. So we'll feature our podcast. We'll do some news. We'll do some interviews. We can take super chats now on being live. So we might as well go live for a couple hours on Sundays. If you want to support the show. We've never been able to monetize our channel before.
Well, now we're making original content. So there you go.
And now we're making original content. But I guarantee you, I give you dollars to donuts. I'll bet you a vegan donut.
Yes.
That we're going to go get right now, the essential curside pickup.
He's going to go get.
That they will demonetize this video as soon as we're done. I will bet you dollars to donuts. But I'm just saying. But that's the show for today, guys. Thanks for joining us. We've been away for a long time. We're going to be back more often. Everything is sort of settling in to a new normal that we're not quite sure is what presents itself.
There's nothing new. There's nothing normal. There's nothing it's going to keep changing and changing and changing. It's going to be a constant change. So people who don't like change are going to have huge issues with anxiety and stuff over the next 2 years. And people who are comfortable with change are going to be fine.
So use your cannabis medicine and vape and stick to the drops and stay tuned to Cannabis Saves the World and subscribe to the channel. And that's this channel now. It's called Cannabis Saves the World. Subscribe. That's actually the URL on the channel name on YouTube. So subscribe, and we'll be back next Sunday with a new podcast and some new news. Thanks, guys. We love you.
Cool. Thank you, everybody.
Free the plant, free the people.
Take good care.
Pot for peace.
Bye.
Oh, I got to play our theme for cannabis.
Yes.
The Cannabis Helps Dementia themes. Thanks, Doug.
Yes.
Thanks, cousin Doug, for an amazing song.
Doug Goodwin.
Doug Goodwin. More to come with that song.
Try something that's new.
Not that commercial. Not that commercial that we're monetized for. Let's try this one.
Why don't you get wise? Get up and get out. Get rid of that frown that's been dragging you down, and get up in the air. Just pretend that you can fly. You'll never know if you can till you try. So get out in your right. Be able and strong. Give vent to that intent you've had pent up for so long. Come